What if everything we have ever been taught about the beginning of human civilization is only a small part of a much larger story? What if the first advanced society on Earth did not vanish without a trace, but instead scattered clues across the planet? From massive stone structures and myths to ancient maps and strange alignments, could the world be filled with strange remnants that refuse to fit neatly into our timelines? Now, in this video, we'll journey through science and archaeology with a sense of curiosity, examining what these quiet traces may be trying to reveal. Before we begin this journey, drop it in the comments below where in the world you're watching from and what time it is there now, and if you're ready for the voyage, hitting that like button and subscribing tells me you're on board. Every child in school is taught a simple timeline about where civilization supposedly begins. We're told that human civilization truly started around Sumer roughly 6,000 years ago. When writing first appeared, cities began to form and people organized themselves in ways that look familiar to us today. This moment is often presented as a clear starting line, as if everything meaningful about human society suddenly switched on at that point. But as the years pass and new discoveries are made, that neat timeline begins to look less solid. Again and again, evidence emerges that pushes these boundaries further back, forcing us to question ideas that were once treated as unquestionable facts. One of the most striking examples comes from a place called Göbekli Tepe in modern Turkey. When archaeologists first uncovered this site, they were stunned by what they found. Rising from the hills were enormous stone pillars, some weighing many tons, carefully arranged into large circular patterns. These stones were not crude or accidental. They were carved with detailed images of animals and symbols showing skill, planning, and artistic intention. According to everything that was taught for generations, the people of that era were supposed to be simple hunter-gatherers, focused entirely on finding food and staying alive. Radiocarbon dating soon revealed something even more shocking. Göbekli Tepe was built around 11,000 to 12,000 years ago. This places it thousands of years before the invention of agriculture, long before pottery, and well before the wheel. By the standard model of history, a site like this should not exist at all. Hunter-gatherers were not expected to organize large groups, coordinate labor on such a massive scale, or build permanent stone monuments. They were assumed to live in small temporary groups with little time for abstract thought, ritual spaces, or long-term planning. Yet Göbekli Tepe stands there regardless of what we thought was possible. Its stones are still upright after all this time, silent but undeniable. This single discovery forced scholars to rethink the relationship between agriculture and civilization. It suggested that complex social organization may have come first, and that farming followed later. But this site is not alone. It is only one example among many strange and uncomfortable discoveries scattered across the planet. All over the world, unusual sites continue to appear in places where we least expect them. They emerge from dense jungles, dry deserts, open plains, and even from beneath the sea. Each one raises the same quiet but troubling question. What if ancient humans were far more capable, far more organized, and far more knowledgeable than we have allowed ourselves to believe? Part of the problem is that the Earth is extremely good at erasing its own history. Volcanic eruptions can bury entire cities beneath thick layers of ash. Earthquakes can flatten stone walls and scatter their remains until they look like natural rubble. Rivers slowly change their paths, washing away settlements or covering them in sediment. Forests grow back over cleared land, hiding signs of human presence. Deserts expand and swallow towns grain by grain. Over long periods of time, even the strongest structures can disappear almost completely. The most dramatic changes of all come from the oceans. At the end of the last ice age, as massive glaciers melted, sea levels rose dramatically. In some regions, the water rose by more than 100 meters. Vast coastal plains that once stretched far into what is now ocean were slowly drowned. River valleys turned into deep underwater channels. Entire landscapes where people may have lived, traded and built communities vanished beneath the waves. If early societies chose to settle along these ancient coastlines, which would have offered food, fresh water, and easy travel, then many of their achievements would now lie hidden under hundreds of feet of water. Reaching them today would require advanced equipment and careful exploration, which is why so much of this possible history remains unseen. Geologists understand these changes well. They have carefully mapped the continental shelves, the shallow underwater extensions of the continents that were once dry land. In many of these places, they have found strange formations. Some clearly result from natural processes shaped by water, pressure, and time. Others are far more puzzling. Their straight lines, flat surfaces, and repeated angles look deliberate, as though shaped by intelligent hands rather than random forces. Off the coast of Japan lies the underwater site known as Yonaguni. There, massive stone structures appear to form terraces, steps, and platforms arranged in an orderly way. Near the shores of India, sonar scans have revealed grid-like patterns buried beneath layers of sediment, stretching for kilometres. Around Malta, stone walls extend outward from known ancient harbours into deeper water, as if the shoreline once lay much farther out than it does today. Each of these finds is debated intensely. Nature can create surprisingly regular shapes, and underwater archaeology requires extreme caution. Drawing conclusions too quickly can lead to mistakes. Still, when all these discoveries are viewed together, they become harder to ignore. At the very least, they suggest that our understanding of early human development is incomplete and possibly deeply flawed. What we do know for certain is this: humans who are anatomically the same as us have existed for roughly 200,000 years. For most of that vast stretch of time, we assume they lived simple lives without cities, farming, or complex societies. But this is an assumption, not proof. The lack of evidence does not mean something never existed, especially when so much potential evidence has been buried, destroyed, or submerged. Ancient cultures across the world preserved stories about earlier ages that came before their own. The Greeks told of Atlantis, an advanced island civilization that was destroyed in a great catastrophe. Hindu traditions spoke of previous ages of humanity, each rising to great heights before collapsing. Mesopotamian myths described antediluvian kings who ruled for impossibly long periods. Many Native American traditions spoke of worlds that existed before this one, destroyed and renewed again and again. For a long time, scholars treated these stories as purely symbolic, meant to teach moral lessons rather than record real events. But as modern science confirms that the Earth has experienced massive floods, sudden climate shifts, and devastating natural disasters, these ancient tales begin to sound less like fantasy and more like memory. They may be exaggerated and wrapped in myth, but they could be rooted in real experiences so powerful that they were passed down for countless generations. Flood myths are especially striking. Nearly every ancient culture has one. There is Utnapishtim in Mesopotamian tradition, Noah in the biblical account, Manu in Hindu texts, Deucalion in Greek stories, Yu in Chinese legend, and countless others among indigenous cultures worldwide. All describe a time when the world was overwhelmed by water and only a few survived. Modern science supports the idea that catastrophic flooding did occur as Ice Age glaciers melted. Massive pulses of meltwater raise sea levels rapidly enough to reshape entire regions within a human lifetime. Imagine witnessing this yourself. Year after year, the sea moves closer, familiar lands disappear, homes are abandoned, entire communities are forced to flee inland. Such events would leave a deep mark on human memory and would almost certainly be preserved through stories, eventually becoming myths and sacred texts. The striking similarity of flood stories across cultures that had no contact with one another suggests they may all be remembering the same global transformation, each from a different place and perspective. This realization opens the door to even deeper questions. If myths can preserve real memories of geological events, what else might they contain? Could stories of lost civilizations, of teachers who brought knowledge, or of cities beneath the sea also hold fragments of historical truth? Stories of giants constructing enormous monuments appear in cultures across the world. Tales of gods who dwelled in the sky and taught humans about the stars stretch from ancient Egypt to Mesoamerica. Legends of previous ages of humanity, each destroyed and then renewed, echo in the histories of India, Scandinavia, and beyond. Either these tales arose independently in separate societies, or they reflect some deeper shared memory from our distant past. Archaeological discoveries continue to challenge our understanding of history. Ground-penetrating radar reveals hidden structures beneath sites we thought we fully understood, suggesting layers of human occupation far older and more complex than previously imagined. satellite images uncover geometric patterns beneath dense jungle canopies, revealing settlements in regions we once assumed were untouched wilderness. Under the oceans, maps of ancient riverbeds and coastlines show landscapes submerged thousands of years ago, while the Amazon rainforest is slowly revealing that vast areas once hosted thriving civilizations before the arrival of Europeans. Geometric earthworks, ancient roads, and agricultural modifications span areas once believed to be wild and uninhabited. The forest simply reclaimed these spaces, concealing human achievements beneath its green cover. The Sahara Desert tells a similar story. Beneath its sands lie the traces of rivers that flowed when the region was wetter, supporting abundant life. Cave paintings across North Africa depict giraffes, elephants, and lush landscapes, scenes unimaginable in today's arid environment. Shifting climates transformed fertile lands into deserts, erasing settlements and forcing human populations to migrate. These findings remind us how quickly environments can change, how rapidly civilizations can vanish, and how ephemeral human activity can be in the face of nature's transformations. In just a few thousand years, forests can turn to deserts, coastlines can retreat, and entire landscapes can be transformed beyond recognition. Given such rapid changes, could evidence of truly ancient civilizations still exist? The honest answer is possibly, but only in traces. Most organic materials, wood, fabrics, even metals, decay within centuries. Only stone endures through deep time. This is why the earliest archaeological evidence we uncover tends to be lithic. Massive stone structures, circles, terraces, and monuments built to last. But the critical question remains: are these the very first efforts of human civilization, or are they remnants of something far older? Consider Göbekli Tepe, dated to approximately 11,000 years ago. Are we witnessing the birth of monumental architecture, or are we seeing echoes of traditions already ancient when these stones were raised? The sophistication of these early sites is striking. The massive pillars were not crudely stacked. They were carefully carved, precisely positioned, and aligned with the stars. This kind of precision implies long-standing knowledge, refined techniques, and cultural continuity, skills that do not arise overnight from small bands of hunter-gatherers. Some researchers now suggest that the end of the last ice age did not mark the beginning of civilization, but rather its second dawn. Perhaps advanced societies already existed along coastlines that are now submerged, developing technologies and knowledge later lost in cataclysms. Survivors may have carried fragments of this wisdom to new lands, planting the seeds of the civilizations we recognize from written history. While this idea remains speculative and requires far more evidence, it offers a possible explanation for some puzzling aspects of early human society: the sudden rise of sophisticated agriculture, the rapid emergence of complex writing, and the appearance of advanced astronomy and mathematics. True knowledge accumulates gradually through careful observation and experimentation, yet many of our earlier civilizations appear to possess remarkable understanding from the start. Egyptian astronomy, at the dawn of the Old Kingdom, shows precision that must have built upon earlier experience. Sumerian mathematics already included place value and geometric principles. The Indus Valley script, though still undeciphered, demonstrates a mature writing system, not humanity's first tentative attempts. Where did this knowledge originate? The standard explanation credits human ingenuity responding to favourable conditions. That is true. Humans are remarkably clever, but it's also worth considering that some knowledge might have been inherited from older traditions. Ancient cultures often claimed their wisdom came from predecessors. Egyptian priests told Greek visitors that their civilizations stretched back far beyond Greek records. Mayan texts describe previous world ages. Hindu writings recount cycles of creation and destruction spanning unimaginably long periods. Were these only myths, or could they be distorted memories of real historical events? Today, we stand at a fascinating point in archaeology. Modern technology allows us to explore previously inaccessible areas, beneath oceans, under dense jungles, and within sediment layers. Dating techniques grow ever more precise. Every year brings discoveries that expand the limits of history, but each answer generates more questions. Much of the past remains hidden, especially underwater, where traces of ancient coastal settlements likely lie. Even in well-studied regions, new imaging techniques reveal features once invisible. Patterns begin to emerge, patterns in architecture, mythology, astronomical alignments, and technology. These patterns repeat across continents and millennia, raising a profound question. Are these remarkable coincidences, or do they hint at a shared human memory of knowledge long lost? These patterns mark the next stage of our inquiry, drawing us toward deeper questions about the origins of civilization, the inheritance of wisdom, and the unseen stories buried within the earth beneath our feet. Some big blocks of stone weigh as much as 50 tons each, and these old people somehow pulled them over rough mountains. In our time today, we find it very hard to move anything that heavy without big machines, yet those builders from long ago did it with great care, as if it were easy for them. It makes you wonder, how did they learn such great skills? Who could have taught them how to cut and move stone in ways that still puzzle us today? But it's not just the huge stones that cause this puzzle. Think about the deep knowledge of the stars they showed, the smart math they used, and how they built their structures to line up exactly with the longest and shortest days of the year, or the times when day and night are the same length. What is even more surprising is seeing these same smart ideas show up in old sites far apart, thousands of miles away, and from thousands of years different, almost like all these groups of people got the same set of ideas from some lost group that lived much earlier than any of them. It's as if a secret group left behind a plan that lasted through time. Take, for example, the oldest maps we know of, such as the one made by Piri, which shows the edges of Antarctica without ice, a fact that should not have been known unless someone saw and mapped it many thousands of years ago, long before the ice came. How could anyone map lands that our new tools only found in recent times? Again, these signs quietly point to something big, even if we're not ready to say it clearly. Perhaps the simplest way to understand all this is knowing that every one of us has had a moment in our own lives when something opened our eyes and changed how we see things. Think of a time when you learned a secret fact that completely changed the story you always thought was true, like finding out that your parents had much harder lives than you knew, or learning a shocking truth about a close friend or family member that left you surprised, or realizing that your job, your main beliefs, or your daily ideas were based on only part of the truth. No matter what the moment was, the feeling is the same. You see new choices, your view of the world gets bigger, and you start to question things again. That is just the kind of change our whole human family could use now. These old puzzles are not just old problems for experts to study. They are strong reminders showing how knowledge can be lost, how strong groups can fall, and how true facts can hide right in front of us for thousands of years without us seeing them. They show that people back then were stronger, smarter, and better at making things than the easy, machine-reliant people we are today. These signs quietly say that real greatness happened once and could happen again if we allow it. Most of all, they warn us that ignoring clear facts just because they do not fit what we think is the fastest way to stay unaware forever. If our ancestors had ignored hard facts, we would still think the Earth is flat, that the sun goes around us, or that illnesses should be treated with old stories instead of real knowledge. Our kind moves forward because brave people at some point refuse to ignore what is right in front of them. That is what makes this first big talk so important, not because it answers everything neatly, but because it opens the way for us to ask hard questions without fear. It urges us to look deeper, not just with normal eyes, but with wonder, courage, and an open mind. Above all, it brings back a deep, exciting truth. Our world is much older, full of more hidden knowledge, and full of bigger mysteries than we ever dare to think. And who knows, maybe those ignored signs were left on purpose, waiting for a time when we face big problems, or are ready for a big change so we can finally understand them. Every old group that ever carved stories into rock, painted important signs on holy walls, or passed their deepest knowledge through the words of wise older people holds a faint memory, a strangely familiar memory of a great society that lived long before any of them. You can find this shared memory in the hot deserts of Egypt, in the thick jungles of Central America, high in the tall mountains of Peru, across the cold areas where the Inuit live, and even among faraway island groups cut off from others. What makes this truly amazing is how these distant peoples, separated by huge oceans, different languages, very different beliefs, and long periods of time, all tell the exact same story. Not just a little similar, but very much the same. They tell stories of an advanced group or wise teachers who came much earlier, people who had knowledge that seemed very modern, like understanding the stars, the seasons, how to build things that last, and the movements of the sky. They describe people, sometimes normal humans, other times godlike, who gave them new ways in healing, growing food, math, rules for living together, and tools that their own groups could not have thought of yet. And almost every time, these stories end with a sad event. A huge disaster hits, maybe a great flood, a big fire, a total collapse, or a scary time when the ground shook. Fires burned, or waters covered everything. In our modern lives, we use the word myth, and right away think of made-up stories, assuming those old people were not smart and just made up tales to explain hard things. But if you have ever listened to a grandparent or heard how older people pass down lessons, you know, stories carry real truth, even if it is wrapped in strange ways. As time passes, the plain facts get covered with symbols, mixed with beautiful words, and filled with spiritual meaning, but the main truth stays the same. So the real question is not if every small part of these stories happened exactly. It is why these separate groups, with no contact between them, spread across the world, all held onto the same basic memory. If one group talks about a huge flood, another about visitors from the sky bringing knowledge, and another about a great time that ended in ruin, you could call it chance. But when these ideas appear in almost every early culture, from the cold areas of Siberia to the lively lands of South America, from the far islands of Polynesia to the many lands of Africa, it makes you realize all of humanity shares a group memory of something we really went through together. Let's look at one of the most well-known examples to show this: the Sumerians, who are known for starting writing, building the first big cities, and making the first laws. Yet, in their own writings on clay tablets that have lasted thousands of years, they clearly say they did not create all that knowledge themselves. No, they said their smart ideas came from beings who lived before a huge flood changed everything. They even listed kings who ruled for very long times, followed by that world-changing disaster that ended it all. Then, after the flood, their life started again. In short, they were not the beginning, they were continuing from others. Now, go to another part of the world with the Maya. Their stories describe an earlier time ended by floods. They believed that gods, or maybe old ancestors depending on the telling, tried making the world several times, with each one falling apart. Their famous calendar, which gets misunderstood a lot today, was not about the end of the world. It followed those repeating patterns of destruction and new beginnings that their ancestors remembered. Again, it is the pattern of birth, growth, great knowledge, total destruction, and starting over. The ancient Egyptians wrote about a time called Tepe, which means the first time. This was a golden age when gods lived among people and taught them many important things, like how to build great structures, grow food, heal the sick, and study the stars. But the word gods can be confusing. In old cultures, it did not always mean heavenly beings. Often, it meant very advanced ancestors whose knowledge seemed like magic. Think about it this way. If someone from the year 3025 went back to the Stone Age with a smartphone or a flying drone, the people there would probably call them a god. The Egyptians believed their own way of life came from the memory of something much older and greater that had existed before them. The Greeks told a similar story about Atlantis. They treated it not as a made-up tale, but as a true history that Egyptian priests shared with a man named Solon, who then passed it on. Atlantis was a strong and advanced society that disappeared in one single night because of huge natural disasters. Whether Atlantis really existed or stands for something deeper, the idea matches many stories from around the world about great people destroyed suddenly by terrible events. Even the Australian Aboriginal people, who have the oldest unbroken culture on Earth, have special Dreamtime stories. These speak of sky heroes and ancient beings who arrived long before ordinary humans. Those beings shaped the land and taught people how to survive, follow laws, and live in peace with nature. These stories go back tens of thousands of years. They are not just simple evening tales told for fun. They are holy memories carefully kept alive for thousands of years. This matters because we often think old spoken stories cannot stay accurate over time. Yet modern science has shown that spoken traditions can remain surprisingly true across many thousands of years. For example, some Pacific Island tribes passed down tales about whole islands sinking under the sea. For a long time, others saw these as only legends. But recent studies of the Earth have proved that those islands really did sink long ago because of volcano collapses. In the same way, flood stories from Native American tribes match the exact time when huge ice walls broke at the end of the last ice age. New evidence from DNA and human movement also supports patterns described in very old myths that experts once thought were only imagination. All of this shows that ancient stories deserve more respect. They are not silly made-up dreams for children. They are real human memories wrapped in beautiful words, hidden in symbols, and carried forward by generations who did not want the past to be lost. Myths are a kind of treasure passed down through time. Just as families share tales about where they came from, the hard times they faced, and the victories they won, ancient groups shared memories of their beginnings. Over many years, some details might grow bigger or softer, but the heart of the story stays true. If your grandmother tells you about escaping war or surviving hunger, the deep feeling and truth remain real even if small parts change a little. The same is true for the old myths of humanity. Imagine people sitting around a fire thousands of years ago. They had no books, no libraries, and no computers to save information. Their only way to keep history alive was through telling stories. So they made those stories strong, easy to remember, and full of deep feeling so others would repeat them faithfully. They spoke about a great society that fell, about wise teachers who helped people start again, and about a huge disaster that changed the world forever. They told these tales not just to entertain, but because they believed future people needed to remember. It would have broken their hearts to know that thousands of years later, we often call their memories simple fairy tales or treat their warnings as fun stories. We walk past their ruins, taking pictures instead of trying to hear what those places want to say. That is why this subject is important. The past did not stay quiet. It left stories, signs, memories, and symbols. It tried hard to share its lessons. When cultures separated by huge oceans, all described the same kinds of events. We have to ask how that could happen, unless they were all remembering something that really took place. Picture survivors of a worldwide disaster spread across different lands. They lose their cities, their tools and knowledge, their writings, and their whole way of living. All that remains is memory. Small groups slowly rebuild and pass down tales of the time before the disaster. As years pass, their languages change, their signs become different, and their surroundings shape small parts of the stories. But the main message, a better time before the great disaster, lives on. That message becomes the base of their whole culture. This is why Egyptians, Maya, Sumerians, Greeks, Chinese, Hindus, Polynesians, Aboriginals, and many other groups all remember an earlier great society that existed before theirs. They did not copy each other or share ideas across oceans they didn't even know about. Instead, they each kept pieces of the same very old shared memory. The stories are not exactly the same because memories are never exactly the same, but the patterns, themes, and order of events are surprisingly similar. Creation, growth, knowledge, disaster, and starting over. Modern studies of the mind also support this. People remember events full of strong feelings much better than everyday things. If a terrible disaster destroyed most of the world, if land disappeared under water or fire, if survivors held on among the ruins of their once great lives, that pain would echo through many generations. It would turn into myth, legend, and holy teaching. It would become the starting point for every culture that came after. This makes ancient stories feel too real to ignore. If they were truly random, they would be completely different from each other, but they match again and again, like pieces of a big puzzle waiting for someone to put them together. Once you start connecting those pieces, something changes inside you. You begin to see that human history is much deeper, much older, and much more connected than we ever thought. These stories feel like sadness for something lost. They feel like remembering and missing a time that is gone but not fully forgotten. They carry the heavy feeling of a family mourning loved ones from long ago, trying hard to keep alive who those people were. This is why myths are important, not because they are perfect history books, but because they speak with the voice of ancient people reaching out across time. They are the distant voices of our ancestors saying, "We lived, we learned, we loved, we fell. please do not forget us. When every culture on Earth carries the same kind of voice, we owe it to them, and to ourselves, to listen. When you look at the great ancient buildings, the pyramids of Egypt, the huge stone structures of Peru, the perfectly cut rocks of Bolivia, the star-aligned temples in Cambodia, you cannot help but feel that something does not fit the usual explanation. We have been taught to see these wonders as separate successes built by groups with no contact, no shared ideas, and no common knowledge. Yet the more closely we look, the harder that idea is to believe. It is like finding the same fingerprints on objects from different continents and different times, all made by the same person. The patterns, alignments, building ways, stories told in the stones and hidden math are so similar and so detailed that calling them pure chance feels like pretending not to see something huge and obvious right in front of us. Monuments made of stone speak a language older than words. They communicate through their shape, their size, and the fact that they have endured for thousands of years. When you stand before an ancient monument, a weathered pyramid, a massive wall made of giant stones, a pillar carved with intricate designs, you feel a connection across time. Something unspoken passes from the builders to you. You sense intention, care, and human effort aimed at lasting forever. These structures were not built only for practical purposes. They were meant to survive the lives of their creators, to carry meaning forward across generations. All over the world, certain building styles appear again and again, almost as if humans everywhere were drawn to the same shapes. Pyramids rise from the sands of Egypt, from the jungles of Central America, and from the plains of China. Step pyramids appear in Mesopotamia, Peru, and Cambodia. Stone circles dot the landscapes of Europe, Africa, and Asia. Massive walls made of carefully cut and perfectly fitted blocks stretch across continents. From Peru's Sacsayhuaman to Lebanon's Baalbek to ancient fortresses in Japan, these repeating forms might be the result of independent invention. Yet the skill and precision required suggest something more. Perhaps shared ideas, inherited knowledge, or remarkable parallel development. Consider the Great Pyramid of Giza, the most studied of all monuments. Its base is aligned almost perfectly with the 4 cardinal directions, deviating by only a tiny fraction of a degree. To achieve this, builders needed careful observations of the stars and advanced surveying techniques. The pyramid's proportions encode mathematical relationships. The ratio between its height and the distance around its base comes very close to pi. Other measurements seem connected to Earth's size and orbit. Whether this knowledge was intentional or accidental is debated, but there are too many precise matches for pure chance. Whoever designed the pyramid clearly understood geometric principles that would not be discovered for thousands of years. Halfway across the world, the pyramids of Teotihuacan in Mexico show a similar understanding of geometry. The Pyramid of the Sun mirrors the proportions of Giza's pyramid in a strikingly similar way. Both complexes align with stars and planets. Both employ precise mathematical ratios. Both demonstrate engineering skills that would challenge modern builders. And the similarities go deeper. Egyptian and Mesoamerican pyramids were more than tombs or temples. They were used to track celestial movements, calculate calendars, and teach astronomical knowledge. Both cultures studied the heavens carefully, tracking planets and predicting eclipses, and they encoded this knowledge in stone, not in materials that would decay. In Peru, sites such as Sacsayhuaman and Ollantaytambo display stones fitted together with astonishing precision. Blocks of irregular shape interlock so perfectly that not even a knife blade can slip between them, and all this without mortar. At Pumapunku in Bolivia, massive andesite blocks feature exact channels, grooves, and right angles. The surfaces are so flat and uniform that even modern machines would struggle to reproduce them. The methods used to shape and move these stones remain a mystery. Theories include unknown alloys for cutting tools or sophisticated abrasion techniques. These constructions reveal more than technical skill. They show knowledge passed down and refined over generations. Such sophistication cannot appear overnight. It requires continuity, a stable culture maintaining and improving its knowledge over centuries. Yet history shows how easily this knowledge can vanish. Libraries burn, languages die, oral traditions fade. When civilizations collapse, through invasion, disaster, or slow decline, they often take their advanced skills with them. Roman concrete formulas were lost for hundreds of years. Damascus steelmaking disappeared completely. The exact composition of Greek fire remains unknown. If so much knowledge can be lost in recorded history, imagine what might have vanished in prehistory. Floods, volcanic winters, or climate shifts could have destroyed entire systems of learning, leaving only fragments for future generations to rebuild. Archaeology sometimes shows this loss. Many sites reveal multiple building phases, with later builders adding structures on top of older foundations, often using cruder techniques. At Baalbek, Roman temples rest on massive platforms that far exceed Roman engineering skills. Even the Romans seem to consider these foundations mysterious relics from an earlier age. Similar patterns appear elsewhere. The Sphinx at Giza shows erosion from water, suggesting it endured periods of heavy rain that Egypt has not seen since the last ice age. If this dating is correct, the Sphinx could predate Egyptian civilization, a survivor from an even earlier culture. Göbekli Tepe presents another puzzle. After centuries of use, it was deliberately buried under tons of soil and abandoned. Why would its creators hide their own masterpiece? Perhaps to protect it from catastrophe, or perhaps burial had symbolic meaning. Across ancient architecture, evidence of astronomical knowledge appears again and again. Stonehenge aligns with the sunrise on the solstice. Newgrange in Ireland channels sunlight into its inner chamber only on winter solstice dawn. Structures such as the Maltese Hagar Kim and sites in Ireland and Scotland reflect star patterns or celestial movements. Builders watched the skies for generations without telescopes or modern mathematics. Yet they tracked the slow wobble of Earth's axis, planetary movements, eclipses and other cycles. This knowledge was practical, vital for planting, harvesting and navigating the seasons. The heavens were humanity's first clock and calendar. But many ancient structures also show knowledge beyond necessity. They encode complex mathematics, geometry, and even artful design meant to last through time. The golden ratio appears in temples around the world. Fibonacci sequences influence dimensions and spacing. Harmonic ratios shape the acoustics of ceremonial chambers. These patterns suggest that the builders not only wanted to survive physically, they wanted their understanding and their vision to endure for centuries, speaking across time to those who would come after them. Beneath the sun-drenched islands of Malta lies the Hypogeum, an extraordinary structure carved entirely underground. Step inside, and the chambers seem alive, resonating at frequencies that touch the human mind in ways almost mystical. When someone chants within its stone walls, vibrations ripple through the air, stirring physical sensations across the entire space. This was no accident. The ancient builders carefully shaped the rock to create these very acoustic effects, using sound itself as a tool, as though they understood invisible waves the way modern science does today. Similar marvels appear around the world. In Mexico, the Great Pyramid of Kukulkan produces a sound remarkably like the call of a sacred bird when someone claps at the base of its staircase. In Egypt, certain chambers amplify some frequencies while muffling others, shaping sound with astonishing precision. Across the British Isles, stone circles create zones where echoes behave strangely, defying expectation. These structures hint at knowledge of sound propagation, resonance and harmonics, principles we now study with physics, but which these ancient people grasped through hands-on experimentation, observation, and intuition. What is truly staggering is that they achieved this without written formulas, modern instruments, or even the scientific method as we know it. How did they learn to wield sound so masterfully? The standard explanation credits long periods of trial and error with successful techniques passed down through generations. Certainly this played a role, yet the consistency, the elegance, the sheer sophistication of these constructions suggests something deeper. Perhaps knowledge was inherited, passed from master to apprentice over countless generations, originating in cultures long lost to time. Ancient myths often hinted exactly this. Across civilizations, stories describe wise teachers emerging after great catastrophes, bringing knowledge of agriculture, architecture, astronomy, and governance to survivors. Were these teachers literal survivors of fallen civilizations or symbolic embodiments of preserved wisdom? The pattern repeats across continents. Egyptians spoke of culture bringers, the Sumerians revered the Anunnaki, the Maya honoured Kukulkan, the Incas celebrated Viracocha. These were not conquerors demanding worship, but instructors, offering understanding that seemed almost divine. Such myths may well preserve memories of real knowledge transfer. Consider teachers who could predict eclipses, chart the movements of planets, or design structures resistant to earthquakes. To people rebuilding after catastrophe, such abilities would appear supernatural. Over centuries, these lessons would spread, evolve, and embed themselves in local traditions, giving rise to strikingly similar practices around the world. The architectural record itself supports this idea. Polygonal masonry, where irregular stones fit together without mortar, appears both in Japan and South America, despite no recorded contact between these regions. Step pyramids emerge independently across multiple continents, yet share precise features: astronomical alignments, internal chambers following geometric patterns, surfaces encoding mathematical relationships. Even agricultural innovations like terracing show striking parallels in Peru, the Philippines, China, and Madagascar. Local adaptations vary, but the engineering principles remain consistent. Language and genetics also hint at deep ancient connections. Words for sun, earth, stone, and water sometimes resemble each other across otherwise unrelated languages. DNA evidence reveals that humans moved and mixed far more than previously believed. Waves of migration carried not only genes but ideas, techniques, and cultural knowledge, spreading fragments of understanding to distant populations. If a civilization existed along ancient coastlines now drowned by rising seas, its survivors might have dispersed worldwide, scattering knowledge that later generations adapted to their surroundings. Over millennia, these fragments could evolve independently, yet retain the core principles their ancestors had discovered. This idea remains speculative, demanding far more evidence than we currently possess. Yet it offers a coherent explanation for puzzling global patterns, suggesting that the roots of human civilization may extend far deeper than recorded history allows. Perhaps our ancestors inherited more knowledge than they alone created. Of course, independent inventions must also be considered. Human minds, faced with similar challenges, often find similar solutions. Stable forms, predictable patterns in nature, and practical needs naturally lead to convergent discoveries. Yet some parallels are difficult to explain purely as coincidence. The precise astronomical alignments, the advanced mathematics, the architectural sophistication. Such refinement implies extended observation, experimentation, and a shared foundation of understanding. The truth may lie somewhere in between. Humanity has always been capable of innovation, yet we also inherit the wisdom of those who came before. Each generation builds upon the foundations laid by earlier masters, adding new insights, preserving old knowledge, and sometimes achieving a level of understanding that would have seemed impossible to those who lived centuries or millennia earlier. In this way, civilization is not merely a story of invention, but a continuing chain of discovery, memory, and transmission stretching back through the shadows of time. When we look at ancient monuments, what we are really seeing is centuries of knowledge frozen in stone. Every single block carefully placed, every line and angle carefully measured, every size and shape carefully chosen shows the thought of people who truly understood the world around them. They took what they knew and engraved it into the most lasting thing they had: rock. These stones carry messages that go beyond words, messages that can still speak to us across thousands of years. Stone does not speak like a human does, but it communicates in other ways, in the way it connects earth and sky, in the balance of shapes and spaces, in the harmony between human ambition and the natural world. The people who built these monuments seem to understand something very important. If knowledge is to survive disasters, wars, and the collapse of civilizations, it must be put into forms that last. When knowledge is expressed through patterns and principles that are universal, through numbers, shapes, and alignment, it can outlive empires and rulers. These monuments stand not just as proof of what was built, but as proof of what was known. And as we study them more closely, we are beginning to realize that these ancient builders understood far more than we have given them credit for. Their knowledge may not have covered everything we know today, but in certain areas, astronomy, construction, the way life follows natural cycles, they reach levels of skill and insight that still amazes us. Recognizing this challenges our modern ideas. We like to think that progress is always moving forward, that ancient people were simpler and less capable than we are. But the truth seems more like a wave than a straight line. Human knowledge rises and falls over time, with periods of brilliant discovery followed by collapse and then rebuilding on older foundations. Each new peak of achievement often relies on knowledge preserved from the past. If this is true, then we are not always discovering completely new secrets when we study the past. Often, we're rediscovering things that were already known long ago, ideas that were lost, forgotten, or hidden inside myths, stories, and monuments. The patterns and knowledge we uncover now may have once been common understanding for ancient peoples. Their science may have been expressed differently from ours, using stone, song and ritual rather than paper and computers, but it was no less real or meaningful. As we continue to explore these ancient works, our question changes. It is no longer simply, how did they build these things? It becomes, what did they know that we have forgotten? And if they knew so much, what else might be hidden in these stones? Perhaps there are not only lessons about building and astronomy, but also warnings, instructions, or messages meant for future generations. Messages that might still be waiting for us to read, thousands of years after they were first carved. If you could magically empty all the water from the world's oceans for just 1 hour and look at the bare ocean floor, it would completely change how we see our planet's past, so much that we'd have to rewrite every single history book from scratch. Under those deep, shadowy waters, you'd find huge flat areas that used to soak up the warm rays of the sun, deep valleys carved by rivers where long ago people might have chased after animals for food, and tall mountain chains that once acted like giant walls separating lost kingdoms and lands that no longer exist. These underwater edges of the continents, which are like hidden arms reaching out from our dry land, cover up whole worlds that were above the waves back when giant woolly mammoths roamed around freely. The level of the ocean isn't stuck in one place forever. It goes up and down like a slow dance tied to the Earth's changing temperatures, pushing forward during hotter times and pulling back when ice ages grip the world. During the peak of the last big freeze, about 20,000 years ago, massive blankets of ice smothered large parts of North America, Europe, and Asia, trapping so much water in frozen form that the seas sank down around 120 meters lower than they sit today. That shift made the edges of the land stretch out hundreds of kilometers farther than our current beaches, turning the map of the world into something totally different and exciting. For example, the island of Britain was linked right up to the main part of Europe, across a wide area people now call Doggerland, like a giant bridge of Earth. Over in Southeast Asia, places like Indonesia, Malaysia, and the nearby islands all blended together into one enormous chunk of land known as Sunda, creating vast spaces for life to thrive. Even the Bering Strait, that narrow gap between Asia and North America, turned into a broad pathway of dry ground, allowing animals and maybe even early humans to wander back and forth without getting wet. Whole stretches of rich, green fields spread out where today there's nothing but chilly, endless ocean waves. Then, as the ice started to thaw around 15,000 years ago, those beautiful landscapes began to disappear under the rising water, slowly at first like a gentle creep, but then in sudden, heart-pounding rushes when huge walls of ice broke apart or giant frozen slabs tumbled down. All that melting water poured into the seas in massive floods, lifting the ocean levels by several meters in just a few lifetimes of people. Picture yourself living through that wild change. Year after year, the places you know and love slipping away under hungry waves that never stop coming, forcing families and tribes to pack up and move or face a watery end. For folks living right by the shore, it must have seemed like the end of everything, a terrifying disaster straight out of nightmares. Those scary stories of survival would get told and retold around campfires, passed down through songs and tales from one generation to the next, until they turned into the famous flood legends that show up in almost every old culture around the globe. What's amazing is how similar these stories are everywhere. A massive flood that wipes out the world, a warning from gods or spirits, just a handful of people who make it through, and then a fresh start for everything. It makes you think they all come from the same huge event on our planet, just seen from different beaches and told in different ways. Nowadays, scientists who dig into the past are paying more and more attention to these sunken worlds, turning their tools toward the secrets hidden under the sea. But it's no easy task. The ocean is incredibly huge, its bottom pitch black and full of dangers, with strong currents that can sweep away anything in their path. Still, new gadgets like advanced soundwave scanners, robot explorers that dive deep without humans, and maps made from satellites are slowly uncovering the mysteries down there, painting pictures of lost lands that spark our imagination. One of the most talked about spots under the water is near the coast of Japan, close to Yonaguni Island, where about 25 meters down there's this gigantic rock formation with flat terraces, wide platforms, and what look like steps cut right into the stone. Some parts have super sharp corners at perfect right angles, and smooth, even surfaces that don't seem like something nature would whip up on its own. It looms up from the depths like an ancient stepped pyramid that's been swallowed by the sea, with a kind of orderly beauty that hints at clever hands shaping it. Experts in rocks and earth are split on what it really is. Some say powerful natural forces like earthquakes shaking things up, or waves wearing away the stone over ages could create those shapes all by themselves. But others zoom in on details that scream human touch, like super straight lines, channels that seem dug out on purpose, and surfaces arranged just so. The argument rages on, full of passion and new discoveries. But no matter who's right, Yonaguni shows us how tricky it can be to tell if something underwater was made by people or just by the wild forces of nature, blurring the lines in ways that keep us guessing. Moving farther to the west, off the shores of India in the Gulf of Cambay, sound scans have picked up weird patterns buried under layers of mud that look a lot like the layout of a bustling city from long ago. These grid-like setups spread out over several kilometres, and divers have pulled up objects that date back to around 9,000 years in the past. If these are truly the leftovers of a real city, they'd be older than any town we know about on dry land today, hinting that well-organised groups of people were building communities along those ancient beaches way before the waters rose and took them away, rewriting what we thought about how early humans lived and grew. Even the sparkling Mediterranean Sea hides its own watery puzzles, like near the island of Malta, where old stone walls stretch out from harbours we already know about into deeper parts of the ocean, lined up and built in ways that suggest they once stood tall on solid ground. Around places like Greece, Cyprus, and other sunny islands, people diving down often stumble upon hidden treasures under the waves. Long walls, stepped terraces, and what seem like the bases of buildings sitting right where sandy beaches used to be thousands of years ago. Every new find stirs up heated debates among experts, because working underwater means you have to be extra careful not to jump to conclusions. After all, nature can fake human work in surprising ways. Crashing waves carve out neat patterns over time, shifts in the Earth's crust make boxy shapes appear, and colourful coral can grow over things and hide what's really there. To prove something was made by humans, you need rock-solid proof, like clear marks from tools, stones stacked in ways that show planning, or materials hauled in from far away that couldn't have gotten there naturally. But as more and more possible sites pop up, it's getting harder to wave them all off as coincidences. From the warm waters of the Caribbean to the busy seas of Southeast Asia and out to the wild Atlantic, these underwater oddities keep popping up and making us wonder. Taken one by one, each could just be a trick of nature, but put them all together, and they paint a thrilling picture of huge areas that once buzzed with human life, now lost and quiet under the ocean, with clues to their stories scattered and buried deep. When researchers use their high-tech maps to detail the ocean bottom, they uncover way more than just strange buildings. They spot ancient river paths twisting across what we now call open water, old river mouths locked in place under dirt, and beach marks outlining coasts that vanished long ago. Along the eastern side of North America, giant river networks show up on those scans, proving that dry land once reached way out past where the waves crash today. In the chilly North Sea, teams have pieced together the shape of Doggerland, that flat, welcoming area that joined Britain to the rest of Europe for thousands of years, filled with thick forests, shimmering lakes, wide open grasslands, and tons of animals roaming free. People lived there happily, tracking game, catching fish in streams, and collecting plants for food and tools. Then, around 8,000 years ago, a massive disaster hit, maybe from huge chunks of land sliding underwater or sudden melt from far-off ice, and a big part of Doggerland got swallowed up in just days or weeks, turning paradise into a memory. Even now, boats fishing in those waters sometimes haul up bits from that lost world. Stones shaped by human hands into tools, bones from animals with clear cuts from butchering knives, and even pieces of old buildings. Each little find adds weight to the idea that lots of people called those now drowned places home, building lives and creating things that the sea later claimed. This whole discovery flips our ideas about how humans first spread out and built societies on their head, opening up exciting new chapters in the story of our ancestors. Old ideas about how human societies began often said that real civilization only started after the last ice age finished, when the weather became steady enough for farming to take hold and spread around. But that old way of thinking missed something really clear. People had already been around for many tens of thousands of years before that, and during those cold, glacial times, the best places to live were along wide coastal flatlands that are now completely underwater because sea levels rose. Imagine if our early ancestors built strong, lasting communities right there on those vanished shores, putting up solid buildings that stood the test of time, swapping goods with faraway groups, and piling up all sorts of knowledge and skills over generations. If that's true, then all the amazing things they accomplished are hidden deep under the waves today, out of reach for most of human history until just lately when technology caught up. Another exciting way to peek into this mysterious past comes from pulling up long tubes of mud from the deep ocean bottom, like time capsules stacked with layers from thousands upon thousands of years. Experts dig into these muddy records to figure out what the weather was like way back then, how high the seas were, and even what plants grew around thanks to tiny pollen bits stuck in the dirt. Now, some clever scientists are hunting through these same samples for clues that humans were busy nearby, like weird buildups of metals that hint at digging ores or melting them down, shifts in carbon types that could mean big fires from clearing land or cooking, or strange dirty stuff that nature couldn't make on its own. So far, nothing rock solid has turned up to prove it. But the whole method shows us that signs of long-lost societies might be lurking in ways we're only starting to spot and understand. Then there's this fascinating idea called the Silurian hypothesis, dreamed up by space scientists named Adam Frank and Gavin Schmidt, who seriously wondered, if a high-tech society flourished on Earth millions of years in the past, would we even notice it now? Their answer, which makes you think twice, is probably no, because over such huge stretches of time, the Earth's rocky skin gets recycled and worn away, wiping out almost every physical trace. But tiny odd chemical marks in certain dirt layers might stick around. When you shrink that down to just tens of thousands of years instead of millions, the same basic rule applies. Most leftovers from those old beachside worlds would get smashed, covered up, or tossed around by the sea. Only the toughest stuff could hang on, like chunky stone buildings if they were there. Those strange chemical hints, or even echoes in old stories passed down through myths. Speaking of myths, they really grab your attention because all over the world, ancient peoples told tales of wonderful lands that got swallowed by the hungry ocean. The most well-known is Plato's story of Atlantis, a mighty place that sank beneath the waves, but you find similar exciting legends everywhere, from the misty Lioness Islands off Britain's foggy shores in old tales, to the magical High Brazil in Irish folklore, the vast Kumari Kandam in Tamil songs of the south, and the dreamy Leamura in Pacific Island whispers. Each one paints a picture of thriving societies full of wonders, suddenly ruined when the waters rushed in. And guess what? Today's earth science backs up that big floods like that really happened, drowning huge areas as ice melted. Whether these stories point to exact spots or just fuzzy memories of massive coastal wipeouts everywhere, they hold on to real bits of what the planet went through. The folks who escaped carried those heart-wrenching accounts to safer inland spots, where the tales twisted and grew into epic legends, but kept their core feeling of loss and wonder. Down under the water, some spots have shapes that are super hard to chalk up to just wind, waves or rocks, doing their thing naturally. Take Pavlopetri off the sunny coast of Greece. Divers and mappers found a whole sunken town there, with neat streets winding around, sturdy houses standing silent, and open yards where people once gathered, all from about 5,000 years back. Sure, that's within the edges of what we call history, but it proves how a buzzing city can slip under the sea and stay shockingly well kept. If we have that from times we sort of know about, it makes perfect sense that older, deeper ones from totally forgotten eras are waiting out there too, After all, we've barely scratched the surface or the bottom of the ocean. About 80 out of every 100 parts of the seafloor haven't been mapped in fine detail yet. We've stared at our planet from outer space way more closely than we've poked around its watery depths. But as our scanning gadgets get sharper and smarter, fresh surprises pop up all the time. Perfectly straight lines where nature loves curves and wiggles, round dips that look too neat to be accidents, or balanced ridges that don't scream just geology at first glance. Some turn out to be plain old natural tricks when you check closer, while others stay puzzling, not fitting easy boxes. Even the ones we figure out as nature's work teach us how wildly inventive our world can be, whipping up designs that fool us into thinking someone smart must have made them. That keeps us on our toes, reminding us not to jump to wild ideas about weird underwater finds. But hey, being careful doesn't mean shutting our minds tight. The ocean definitely stashes away chunks of human story. We know big groups of people call those now flooded lands home. The real mysteries are just how together in advance those groups got, and what scraps of their lives might still be down there. One cool path to answers is sifting through seafloor mud for tiny clues, like quick flips in plant life, weird jumps in carbon, or rare bits that scream humans were here. Nothing definitive yet, but our tools are getting better fast. What's invisible today could shine bright tomorrow. The sea also saves stuff by tucking it away in blankets of sediment, where on land it would rot quickly from air and bugs. But underwater, things like old shipwrecks from hundreds of years ago come out looking fresh if they're shielded right. Tough stone setups could last even longer, maybe tens of thousands of years, if the dirt piles on fast. So, out on those underwater shelves that used to be dry land, who knows what might be preserved? Busy docks from when beaches stretched way farther, homes from happy villages before the big soak, or handmade treasures from folks whose very names faded away without a single written word. The hunt goes on, fueled by that itch to know more and boosted by slick new tech. Every year, fresh sound wave maps, bold exploring missions and eye-opening finds that snap into the big picture. Bit by bit, the secret story of how we humans have danced with the ocean comes clearer. It's always been a wild mix, with the sea handing out fish and safe paths for boats one day, then slamming storms and creeping floods the next. Our far back kin got that push-pull vibe, seeing the waters as a generous friend and a fierce foe wrapped in one. When the seas surged up in massive disasters, flooding everything they knew, they felt that split at its rawest. Their kids and grandkids kept the memories alive, weaving them into myths and legends as life lessons. Those yarns stuck around not just for fun, but because they packed real punch, warnings wrapped in wonder. The world can flip upside down in a flash, the ocean can swallow what you love, and nothing hugging the shore lasts forever. Hard-won wisdom from tough times, saved in stories when the real stuff got swept off. Us modern folks crowding closer and closer to the water's lip could learn a thing or two from those old echoes. With the planet heating up, seas are climbing again, putting beach towns everywhere at risk. Maybe one day we'll star in the myths of tomorrow, clever builders by the blue, watching waves reclaim our shiny stuff. The ocean plays double agent as keeper and wiper, holding on to secrets it picks while ditching the rest. Its dark depths brim with mysteries we've only dipped a toe into. As we dive deeper with our searches, we might discover that our human tale plunges way farther under the waves than the usual history books say. Or maybe we'll see that shore life stayed pretty basic until not too long ago. Either outcome, the quest itself sparkles with value. It shouts that just because we haven't found proof doesn't mean it's not there, especially with so much maybe proof drowned under hundreds of feet of salty blue. It schools us in staying humble about what we think we know, spotlighting the huge gaps in our own beginnings. Those sunken worlds still murmur to us, not in clear speech, but in thrilling what-ifs. They hint that big wipeouts have always crashed through human days, that great groups have bloomed and busted with the Earth's beats, that remembrances outlive even the mightiest stones, and they nudge us that the best clues might not be in plain sight, but stashed where the planet hid them, biding time until we're wise and wired enough to truly hear. All over our world, strange patterns show up in places where you wouldn't expect them at all. Perfectly round circles appear, along with lines that are straight as an arrow, and arrangements that line up way too exactly to be just by chance. When today's experts use their tools to map out old buildings and monuments from long ago, they find math connections that feel out of place, like ideas about shapes and stars that people supposedly didn't figure out until thousands of years later. Maybe it's just how humans are wired, always spotting order even when things are messy and random. But these old lineups are so steady and clever that it's hard to brush them off as nothing. They're not fuzzy matches, but spot-on sizes, planned-out math, and a deep grasp of how the sky moves and how the ground is shaped. Take the Great Pyramid at Giza, for example. It's a shining case of this amazing exactness. The bottom of it lines up perfectly with the main directions: north, south, east, and west. The mistake in that lineup is tinier than 1/120th of a degree. To get that right, the people who built it had to watch the stars super carefully and use smart ways to measure the land. Without any fancy gadgets like we have now, they nailed down true north in a way that's jaw-dropping. And that's not all. The pyramid's sizes hide even more secrets. If you take its height and compare it to the distance around its base, you get a number super close to pies, which is 3.14159. People still argue if that was on purpose or just luck, but it seems too spot on to be a total accident. Other parts of the pyramid tie into the Earth's own sizes in wild ways. The full length around the base, when you multiply it in a certain way, matches up to half a minute of latitude right at the equator. Jump halfway across the globe to Teotihuacan in Mexico, and the Pyramid of the Sun there shows off the same kind of shape smarts. Its sizes echo Giza's in a spooky similar fashion. Both places point towards stars and planets, use fancy math ratios, and show off building skills that even today's workers would struggle to copy with their tools. What makes it even weirder is how their spots on the map connect. Teotihuacan is at 19.69 degrees north, while Giza sits at 29.97 degrees north. When you crunch those numbers, they link up to the Earth's measurements and to each other in neat proportions. The odds of that happening on their own, across a huge ocean, and over many hundreds of years, feel tiny and almost impossible. Digging deeper, lots of old spots around the world seem to hug imaginary circles that wrap around the planet like belts. When smart folks mark the spots of big monuments like Giza, Easter Island, Machu Picchu, Angkor Wat, and Mohenjo-Daro, they notice these places often sit right on or super close to those circles. Sure, doubt to say that if you pick enough dots, you'll always find some pattern because math works that way. That's a good point, but here's the twist. These aren't just any old spots. They're the fanciest and most advanced old buildings we know about, which hints that maybe someone planned it that way instead of it being pure luck. On top of that, these ancient places are packed with star alignments that go way beyond what we think early people knew. At Stonehenge, the main line points straight at the sun rising on the longest day of summer, something that took years of watching the sky to pin down. Over in Ireland at Newgrange, sunlight sneaks into the deepest room only at dawn on the shortest winter day, lighting up the hallway with a warm golden beam. Angkor Wat's whole setup copies the Draco star group with crazy accuracy. And at Chichen Itza, the Temple of Kukulkan throws a shadow like a snake during the days when day and night are equal, tying right into stories about a feathered snake coming down from the sky. Tons of these old monuments everywhere mark the times when the sun is at its highest or lowest, or when days and nights balance out, or even where certain stars sit, with sharpness that matches what astronomers do today. Pulling that off meant more than glancing up now and then. It called for watching the sky over many lifetimes, doing tricky math, and getting how the Earth slowly tilts and wobbles. That wobble, called precession, makes stars look like they're shifting spots over thousands of years. In the Great Pyramid, tunnels once aimed right at Orion's belt and Thuban, which was the North Star back then, not the one we see now. That means the builders knew about this wobble and how the stars move over time. A brainy idea we usually credit to folks from way later. No matter what we guess about what ancient people could do, some numbers keep popping up in their buildings like they're whispering secrets. Things like 72, 108, 216, 432, and bigger versions of them. These aren't picked out of a hat. They link to that Earth wobble cycle. Our planet's axis finishes one full spin of that wobble about every 25,920 years. If you split that by 360 degrees, you end up with 72 years for each degree of shift, a number that shows up all over old stories and buildings. In Hindu tales, time stretches out in huge loops, like the Kali Yuga lasting 432,000 years, with other ages following the same number patterns. Norse legends talk about 432,000 fighters in their heaven hall. Old Sumerian lists of kings add up their rule times to exactly these kinds of numbers. Seeing them repeat in faraway cultures makes you think they're not just made up, but hiding real know-how about the universe's rhythms. Old buildings also buzz with amazing sound tricks. Down in Malta's Hippodrome, a temple dug out from rock 5,000 years ago, some rooms echo at waves that mess with your brain in cool ways. If someone sings or chants there, the whole place shakes and you feel it tingling through your bones. That wasn't a fluke. The makers carved the stone on purpose to make those sound effects happen. You see this sound of wizardry popping up everywhere. In Mexico's pyramids, if you do things just right, you get special noises. Clap your hands at the bottom of the Kukulkan steps and the bounce-back sounds like the call of a holy Quetzal bird. Inside Egyptian rooms, some sounds get louder while others fade away. Stone circles in Britain have spots where voices boom or echoes twist in odd patterns. All this shows that ancient folks got how sound travels, bounces and blends. Ideas from physics and building know-how that wow today's sound experts. They must have played around with it hands-on to nail results that still surprise us. One of the biggest puzzles from long ago comes from how perfectly ancient people shaped and fitted huge stones. Picture this. In a place called Pumapunku in Bolivia, there are enormous blocks made from a rock called andesite. These blocks lock together so tightly that you can barely see the tiniest gap between them. Their surfaces shine like they've been buffed with care, smooth as glass, and the corners come together at exact right angles, sharp and flawless. Each one of these giants weighs many dozens of tons, like the weight of several elephants stacked up, but they line up in straight rows without a single wobble. Now think about it. Back then, folks didn't have tough iron tools, strong steel saws, or any fancy machines we use today. So, how on earth did they make everything so even and precise? It feels like a magic trick that leaves us scratching our heads. Not far away, at a spot named Sacsayhuaman, the walls are built like a giant puzzle. The stones aren't cut into boring squares or rectangles. Instead, they're all weird shapes, carved to fit snugly with the ones next to them, like pieces in a jigsaw that only match one way. The joins are so close that you couldn't slip even the thinnest razor blade in between. To pull this off, even with endless patience and hard work, you'd need a really smart grasp of how things hold together, what rocks are made of, and how to think in 3 dimensions, like seeing shapes from every angle. Some curious thinkers today guess that those old builders knew secrets we're just starting to figure out again. Maybe they used sound waves to vibrate and move those heavy stones, or special echoes to carve the rock just right, or even forgotten gadgets for slicing and shining them up. Sure, these ideas are a bit out there, like stories from an adventure tale, but they try to explain real head-scratchers about getting such spot-on work done with what we call basic tools. Another cool thing shows up in old buildings all over the world. A special number called the Golden Ratio, which is about 1.618. You see it in temples from Greece, pyramids in Egypt, and big temple complexes in Cambodia, where the sizes and shapes follow this magic math rule. Did those builders crunch the numbers on purpose, or did they just sense that it made everything look balanced and beautiful? Either way, finding it in so many far-apart places hints that people everywhere had a strong love for shapes and patterns. Then there's this sequence named after Fibonacci, where each number is the sum of the 2 before it. 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, and so on. These numbers pop up in spirals on ancient carvings, from twisty designs on Celtic stones to colourful patterns in Mayan creations and peaceful Buddhist circles. It's no accident these folks spotted the same twists in nature, like the curl of a nautilus shell, the bumps on a pine cone, the way flower petals unfold, or even the huge swirls of galaxies in the sky. By weaving these natural patterns into their buildings, they made places that feel right, like they hum with a hidden rhythm that touches your soul without words. They weren't sitting with calculators. They watched the world around them and copied its secrets straight into stone, building in tune with the universe's own blueprint. If you plot out these old special spots on a world map, strange lines and groups appear. Lots of them sit on the same latitude lines, connected by easy math links, or bunch up at certain angles or stretches apart. Some folks think this means someone planned it all out. Maybe a worldwide web of holy places or leftovers from shared wisdom across oceans and lands. But many experts roll their eyes, saying humans are great at spotting fake patterns if we hunt long enough, like seeing faces in clouds. That's a fair point. Yet with so many math, star and shape links piling up, it's hard to wave it all away as nothing. At the very least, it shows our ancestors were way smarter and more skilled than old history books give them credit for. Now let's ponder what this means. If these big stones hide fancy knowledge, who first figured it out? Maybe each group came up with it on their own, which would explain some matches, but the way the same ideas show up everywhere makes you wonder if it was super lucky inventions at the same time, or if wanderers carried tips from one lost group to others. Imagine a made-up early society that gathered tons of star-watching and number-knowing before some big disaster hit. The ones who made it through could have spread bits of that smarts to new places, where it got mixed in and saved in the stones we see today. This is just a guess, needing way more proof than we've got, but it ties up loose ends like why smart stuff pops up suddenly in young cultures, why building tricks are alike around the globe, and why star knowledge shows up before anyone writes it down. Or maybe it's just human brains being awesome. With eyes to see the sky, simple sticks to measure, and the same wishes to track seasons, praise the stars and make lasting marks, different folks might hit on the same fixes. The night sky looks pretty much the same from spots at matching heights on Earth after all. Both ideas make sense. People are super creative, dreaming up new things alone, but they also pass down know-how, stacking it higher over time. Probably it's a mix. Fresh ideas boosted by old lessons, shared through travels, swaps and mingling. What's crystal clear is that these old piles of stone store info on stars, numbers, sounds and shapes. They're like libraries without books, with secrets locked in their forms. To make a building that lines up with the sun on the shortest or longest days takes years of watching the sky. To sneak in exact number balances needs a grip on shape rules. To create echo tricks calls for playing with vibrations and tones. These weren't simple folks lucking into happy accidents. They were sharp watchers, tireless testers, clever makers who knew their world inside out and sealed that wisdom in the toughest stuff around: rock. The clues they left echo through thousands of years in a tongue everyone gets: numbers. The circle's magic ratio, pi, means the same to any smart being, no matter where or when. Star lineups can still be checked today. Shape ties don't fade. In a way, these old builds are like letters mailed to the future, using the one code sure to survive them. Maybe they meant it that way, or maybe it's just the human urge to make stuff that matters, but either path leads to the same spot: wisdom saved in shapes, ready for us to unlock. As we build our own lasting marks, like webs of satellites circling the planet, far-flying ships with facts about us, or digital hideaways built to beat time, we're echoing what they did ages ago. That push to leave a trace, to wrap up our smarts in something tough, to chat with whoever follows, seems baked into being smart. Maybe that's the true heart of these old patterns. They prove that wanting to grasp the world and share that grasp goes beyond one group or time. It's part of being aware, shining through whatever tools we have. For them, it was rocks, the heavens, and shapes. For us, gadgets and info. But the core drive is the same. These patterns might not nail down one starting supergroup, but they do shout that human cleverness digs way back into misty times, deeper than we thought. They reveal our long-ago kin weren't rough and ready, but just took different roads, smart in ways as good as ours, if not the same. As we keep cracking their codes, it's like a chat over ages. They whisper in shapes, we answer with studies. They hide truths in stone, we pull them out with tools. The talk rolls on, linking thoughts across huge gaps of years, bound by the same wonder about the stars and where we fit. When we talk about memory, we usually think of it as something very personal, like our own minds holding on to special moments from our lives, or our brains storing facts and feelings. But memory goes way beyond that, stretching into much bigger and stranger forms. Imagine the entire planet Earth as a giant living book, not remembering things with thoughts or words, but through real, physical marks left behind over huge stretches of time. Every single rainstorm that pours down, every fiery volcano that explodes, and every creature that has ever walked, flown, or swam on this world leaves behind tiny clues. These clues build up slowly, layer by layer, getting squished into solid rock or locked away in the frozen depths of ocean-bottom mud and massive sheets of glacial ice. All together, they create what we can call the Earth's own memory bank, a never-ending collection of stories about how our world has changed, written in a secret code made of chemicals, dirt, and ancient leftovers. If we get really good at decoding this code, who knows what secrets we might uncover? Maybe even signs that smart societies, full of inventions and cities, came and went long before humans ever showed up on the scene. Geologists, those adventurous scientists who study rocks and the ground beneath our feet, act like detectives flipping through the pages of this enormous planetary diary. When they cut into the side of a steep cliff or pull up long tubes of mud from the deep sea floor, they're basically reading chapters from Earth's life story. Each thin band of dirt or sediment tells its own tale, like a snapshot frozen in time. For example, a dusty layer of volcanic ash might whisper about a massive explosion that shook the world ages ago, while tiny specks of pollen could paint a picture of lush forests and colourful flowers that bloomed in a long-lost era. Even the mix of different atoms in the rocks, called isotopic ratios, can reveal how hot or cold the planet was back then, like a built-in thermometer from the past. This amazing record doesn't just cover a few thousand years, it reaches back millions upon millions of years, giving us a window into times we can barely imagine. Down in the icy worlds of Greenland and Antarctica, scientists drill out long cylinders of frozen water, called ice cores, that hold secrets from as far back as 800,000 years ago. Inside these cores, little bubbles of trapped air act like time capsules, preserving the very breath of ancient skies. By carefully studying these frozen treasures, experts can piece together what the weather was like way back when, figuring out exactly when the Earth heated up like a warm summer day, when it chilled down into icy winters that lasted forever, when huge wildfires roared across landscapes, or when volcanoes spewed out more ash and gases than usual. All of this comes from the chemical fingerprints locked away in the ice, allowing us to rebuild the past with surprising accuracy and detail. It's like having a magical machine that lets us travel back in time without leaving the lab. Every now and then, these ice cores and rock layers surprise us with weird puzzles, sudden jumps in carbon levels that don't make sense, strange build-ups of metals, or atomic mixes that seem out of place. Most of the time we can explain them away with natural events, like a giant space rock smashing into the planet, a supervolcano blowing its top, or a lightning-sparked blaze that burned vast forests to the ground. But a handful of bold thinkers have started wondering about something wild and almost forbidden. What if some of these oddities came from clever beings using advanced tools and machines? This mind-bending idea sparked what's known as the Silurian hypothesis, dreamed up by stargazing scientists Adam Frank and Gavin Schmidt. They posed a thrilling question. Suppose a bustling society with factories and technology thrived millions of years ago, say during the time when dinosaurs ruled the land. Could we spot any leftover signs of them today? Their answer, which might make you shiver a bit, is probably not. The Earth is like a giant recycling machine, constantly churning and renewing itself through massive underground forces. The planet's outer skin, or crust, gets pulled down into super hot depths by moving plates of land, where it melts away and bubbles back up as fresh rock. Over just a few million years, wind, water, heat, and chemical changes wipe away almost every mark from the surface, like an eraser scrubbing a chalkboard clean. What could possibly stick around? Maybe faint whispers in the form of unusual chemical mixes, quirky patterns in the dirt layers, or rare elements clumped together in ways nature wouldn't do on its own. This same idea works even for shorter chunks of time. Picture a clever group of beings living 50,000 years ago. Their stuff wouldn't last long at all. Things made from plants or animals rot away in just hundreds of years, metals rust into dust, and even tough concrete breaks down into crumbs. Only big stone buildings might hang on, but even those would wear away to nothing if given enough time, blending back into the hills and valleys. If those long-gone societies really did exist, we wouldn't stumble upon their ruined towers or rusted gadgets scattered around. Instead, we'd have to hunt for sneaky clues hidden in the Earth's chemical diary. Things like surprise bursts of carbon, odd spreads of metals or atomic fingerprints that scream this wasn't made by volcanoes or stars. To find them, we'd peer deep into mud cores from the sea, ice samples from frozen poles and rocky stripes in the ground, zooming in all the way to the tiniest molecules. We're already doing this kind of detective work to understand how we're changing the planet right now. Burning old fuels from underground tweaks the air's atomic makeup in telltale ways, making plastic litter the oceans with bits that sink into the mud, and old bomb tests sprinkled radioactive specks all over the world. Far in the future, rock hunters studying our time would spot a clear chemical badge labelling it the Anthropocene, the short chapter when people shook up the whole planet's chemistry like a snow globe. So far, no slam-dunk proof of older smart societies has popped up, but just looking for it teaches us huge lessons. It shows how even the fanciest civilizations are like fleeting sparks compared to the slow, endless tick of Earth's clock. We often gawk at old ruins and call them ancient, but the oldest pyramids are just quick flashes in the grand scheme, barely a few thousand years against the planet's 4.5 billion years of spinning through space. Earth thinks in terms of millions and billions of years, where almost everything gets dissolved, reused, or reshaped into something new. Yet, even in this non-stop makeover, some stubborn bits hold on tight. Tiny zircon crystals tougher than anything, older than our own moon, still sparkle in rocks today. Specks of dust that danced in the skies of a baby Earth linger on, tucked away in stone. Through these microscopic survivors, scientists uncover tales of the distant past, like when life-giving oxygen first filled the air, when green plants started turning sunlight into food, or when carbon levels shot up for no obvious reason. These sudden carbon jumps are like the Earth's way of remembering big feelings, intense events that scarred the planet forever, leaving marks that time can't fully heal. If a high-tech world had come before ours, we might spot its scars in the same sneaky way, not as petrified robots or tools, but as the leftover mess from whatever power they harnessed, etched into the rocks. The ground also keeps a living record through biology, where every animal and plant carries genetic echoes of its family tree, small notes about how they changed to survive tough times. In our own human DNA, there's a story older than any book, showing that our kind almost vanished around 70,000 years ago, maybe shrinking to just a few thousand survivors after a colossal volcano blasted the skies dark. That close call wiped out so much variety in our genes, possibly erasing any hints of other human groups that might have built amazing things before. Whatever was left became the start of us, a fresh page for a species that forgot its deeper roots, stepping onto an old, familiar world like actors in a never-ending play. Geologists sometimes compare the Earth's history to a steady heartbeat, gentle rises in warmth, slow drops into cold, regular beats of birth, and endings pulsing through the ages. But every so often that rhythm skips or stumbles, hit by something huge and unexpected. A wipeout of most life on the planet, a massive flood that reshapes the land, or a quick climb in carbon that changes everything. These breaks feel like dramatic twists in the Earth's own life story, signalling fresh starts or wild turns. What makes hunting for signs of ancient clever worlds so tricky is time itself, the vast ocean of it that swallows up clues and blurs the lines between what was natural and what might have been made by thinking minds long gone. The farther you look into the past, the blurrier the story of our world gets, like trying to read an old book with faded pages. Rocks bend and squeeze under immense pressure, changing their very form through heat and force. Whole areas of land drop deep into the fiery heart of the planet, only to rise up again after countless ages as towering mountains. But even in all this chaos and ruin, tiny pieces survive, holding secrets about how the air around us has shifted over time. Think about those ancient tales of massive floods that appear in stories from almost every corner of the globe. There's the epic from Mesopotamia about a hero named Gilgamesh facing a great deluge, the Bible's account of Noah building an ark to save life, the Hindu legend of Manu surviving a world-ending flood, the Greek myth of Deucalion and his wife repopulating the earth after waters receded, and even renewal stories from Native American cultures where floods wash away the old to make way for the new. At first, experts thought these were just made-up symbols or moral lessons. However, today's study of the Earth's layers shows that huge floods really did happen as the last ice age came to a close, reshaping everything in dramatic ways. Giant bursts of melting ice sent sea levels soaring in sudden rushes, swallowing up enormous stretches of coastline where people once lived. Massive lakes trapped behind walls of ice suddenly broke free, gouging out deep valleys and canyons in a single night of roaring water. For the folks who lived through those terrifying moments, it must have felt like their entire known world was being erased forever. Over many generations, those raw memories turned into polished legends, serving as warnings, reminders of vanished eras, and echoes of what was lost. What grabs the attention of scientists today is how closely these old stories match up with what the rocks and sediments tell us about real events. It's almost as if humankind has been whispering to itself across time, trying to hold on to a forgotten truth, that our planet can flip upside down in an instant, that whole societies can disappear without a trace, and that hints of their lives might still be lurking just out of sight, waiting to be uncovered. With the help of cutting-edge gadgets, we're peering into the past like never before, uncovering mysteries that were once invisible. Tools like radar that sees through the ground, satellites snapping pictures from space, and sound waves mapping the ocean floor are revealing hidden buildings and landscapes we never knew existed. Deep in the lush Amazon rainforest, experts have spotted signs of ancient roads weaving through what is now thick jungle, buried under layers of growth that built up over hundreds of years. Out in the vast Sahara Desert, clues to long-gone rivers and bustling communities point to a time when that sandy wasteland was a fertile green paradise teeming with people. Every new find shakes up what we thought we knew about how clever and advanced early humans really were, showing us that our grasp on history is still full of gaps and surprises. The more treasures we dig up, the clearer it becomes that we've only scratched the surface of what's out there. The ground we walk on isn't just ordinary mud and stones, it's like a vast, silent library stacked with volumes from every chapter of the planet's long saga. Decoding it demands the sort of slow, steady patience that the Earth itself embodies, never rushing or complaining, simply enduring through the ages. Rocks hold their secrets without haste, and fine grains of sediment settle quietly, layer upon layer, capturing the tiniest whispers of life from long ago. Delicate shells from sea creatures, microscopic plankton drifting in ancient waters, even dust blown in from far-off lands. Researchers sift through these deposits one speck at a time, piecing together puzzles about past temperatures, levels of breathable air, and even the directions of winds that blew millions of years back. Tucked away in those quiet stacks might be odd mysteries we haven't figured out yet, like sudden surges of rare metals, peculiar chemical compounds, or faint traces of something beyond our current understanding. Who knows? Maybe we've already pulled such samples from the deep and stashed them in cold storage rooms, dismissed as mere accidents or impurities, just waiting for a fresh look. What amazes people the most is how tough and unbreakable our planet truly is, always bouncing back no matter what gets thrown at it. Forests sprout anew from scorched earth, oceans keep churning their endless cycles, and living things find clever ways to adjust and thrive. Even if great societies collapse in flames or fade away, the Earth simply absorbs those dramatic turns into its endless tale, mends the wounds, and carries on without missing a beat. To this ancient world of ours, a span of several thousand years is nothing more than a quick pulse in its vast heartbeat. That could be why signs of earlier times grow so dim and hard to spot. Time wears down every edge, smoothing out the details until only the bare outline of the adventure lingers. Yet even those vague outlines can spark recognition, like spotting a familiar shape in the clouds long after the original form has dissolved. In that way, the planet's deep memory links us to anyone who might have tread these paths before us, weaving together the shared drive to create wonders, to wonder about the stars, and to cling to survival against all odds. Each time we dig a mine, carve out a quarry, or unearth a bed of fossils, it's like striking up a chat with history itself, unravelling its quiet thoughts, one streetum at a time, while adding our own scribbles to the ongoing narrative. This back and forth never truly ends. It simply passes the voice to the next storyteller in line. And though the Earth's recollections are mostly even-handed and neutral, it does have its tempers. Stretches of serene harmony lasting for immense epochs, broken by bursts of fierce upheaval like mass die-offs, overwhelming floods, shaking quakes, or raging infernos. human groups tend to emerge and bloom in those peaceful gaps between the storms, reaching their peaks when the world is steady, only to slip away when the next big shift arrives. If this back and forth pattern has looped on for millions upon millions of years, then any whisper of the very first advanced society might be smothered under so many overlapping updates that it's nearly impossible to make out clearly. But just like faded script peeking through beneath fresh writing on a reused page, those subtle marks could still shine through with the right instruments in hand. We've started crafting those clever devices to unlock the secrets, methods to study tiny atomic fingerprints in materials, radar that dives deep into hidden realms, drills pulling up cores from buried sediments, and ways to rebuild long-lost genetic codes from scraps. Each one acts as a translator for the planet's hushed collection of records, teaching us that our world notes down every single happening, no matter how small. It even captures echoes of feelings in a sense, like the strain etched into tree rings from harsh seasons, the scars on coral reefs from turbulent times, or the stubborn strength baked into the soil after trials. If a long ago people reshaped the land through planting fields, digging for treasures, or raising grand structures, the ground would bear those marks forever. If they tinkered with the skies above, frozen ice sheets would trap proof of it. The planet plays no games of preference. It hoards every detail without bias. So the big puzzle hangs in the air. If the Earth holds on to everything, what message is it sending us right this moment? Maybe it's hinting that we're not the one-of-a-kind wonders we imagine, that others have trodden this exact trail, grappled with the same tough decisions, and climbed to matching glories. Or perhaps it's gently nudging us that letting go of memories is woven into the grand loop too. That erosion of the old makes room for fresh beginnings to sprout. Our own quest to hunt for vanished worlds is a piece of that planetary recollection in action. We're aiding the Earth in recalling its own forgotten corners, stitching together scattered bits it has tucked away, and lending words to silent strata that can't tell their tales alone. No matter if those depths spill stories of a missing civilization or not, they share something deep and moving. That on this spinning orb nothing ever vanishes for good. It all transforms, blending into the next chapter seamlessly. And who knows, maybe that's the wisdom the earliest builders grasped, that the truest legacy isn't in flashy towers or carvings, but in the subtle imprints woven into the fabric of the world. The very dirt beneath our shoes might still pulse with their gentle rhythm, not as crumbling walls, but as a harmonious balance, a quiet order that steered them through their days and subtly directs our steps today. As we tune our ears to that ancient beat, the path ahead sharpens, since the planet stashes its tales in unyielding stone and soft-settling mud. The sagas of those who preceded us could still resonate in the myths and legends that outlasted all else. Those yarns might not be pure invention after all, but human renditions of the Earth's rocky recollections turned into spoken words. And when our modern knowledge dances with those age-old fables, we just might start spotting the hidden truths nestled in between, etched in a tongue far older than any language we know. From the very beginning of human history, people in every part of the world have shared tales about how everything started and how it all came crashing down in a huge disaster long ago. These stories talk about massive floods that swallowed the land, fierce fires that cleaned everything out, whole cities disappearing under giant waves, and smart guides who showed up to share secrets on rebuilding what was gone. For a long time, experts brushed these off as just made-up fables or simple lessons about right and wrong, dressed up in fancy dream-like words. But as our gadgets get better and we learn more about the Earth's past, something amazing keeps popping up. These old yarns start feeling less like wild dreams and more like fuzzy memories of things that really happened. It's not that these legends and hard facts suddenly match up perfectly, because they use totally different ways of talking. Facts rely on numbers, tests, and proof you can check, while legends use symbols, feelings, and deep emotions to get their point across. Yet both are trying to paint a picture of the same big world and the same wild happenings. And when we pay close attention to what those ancient tales are really saying, we discover they've been pointing to real truths about the ground under our feet or the stars up above all this time, just in a way that early folks could grasp and pass down through generations without forgetting. For hundreds of years, smart people laughed off the idea of worldwide flood stories as nothing more than shared daydreams that popped up everywhere. Almost every old group of people had their own version, a huge rush of water that scrubbed the planet spotless, leaving just a handful of lucky ones alive to start over. But in the last few decades, experts who study rocks and dirt have proven that enormous floods did change the face of the Earth right around the time the last big freeze ended. The oceans climbed up more than 100 meters high, and giant lakes trapped behind walls of ice suddenly broke free, slicing deep valleys into the land in just one night. Places like the area around the Pacific Northwest, the spot near the Caspian Sea, and the basin by the Black Sea saw quick floods that flipped whole chunks of the world upside down in the blink of an eye, or at least within a few lifetimes. If you were there dodging the rising waters, your kids and grandkids would never let that story die. They might spin it as a punishment from the gods, a fresh start from the universe, or a big wash to get rid of all the bad stuff. The legend keeps the heart of the memory alive, even if the exact bits get blurry over time. Take the old Mesopotamian yarn about a guy named Utnapishtim, scribbled down thousands of years before the Bible's Noah hit the scene. It spells out the same scary mess with a boat to ride it out, birds flying off to scout for dry ground, and a tall peak where the ride finally stops. The Sumerians, Babylonians, and Hebrews all whispered different twists on this same adventure, maybe blowing up a true local flood into something that felt like the end of everything. Way over in the east, ancient Hindu writings chat about a fellow called Manu who got a tip from a talking fish about the coming drown-out. In sunny Greece, a survivor named Deucalion made it through a watery wipeout ordered by Zeus to freshen up humankind. Over in China, a hero named Yu stepped up to control the wild waters after they gobbled up the countryside. And jumping across oceans to the Americas, or down to Aboriginal Australia, native folks spin yarns about monster floods that smashed earlier versions of the world to bits. These tales, split by huge lands and deep seas, line up in their big ideas, and when they seem to have happened, they might not all point to one single splash, but they echo the same rhythm of the planet, flipping out fast and people scrambling to hang on. When science finally nodded yes to the idea that seas shot up wildly about 12,000 years ago, those old stories and the clues in the mud gave each other a quiet high five. One was a colourful yarn full of signs and wonders, the other cold hard layers of earth telling the tale, but both captured that giant shift in the world's shape. That's what kicked off a new hunt where experts stopped seeing legends as pure fun and started treating them like handed-down diaries of real shake-ups, sifted through countless tellings. Volcanoes, for instance, sparked endless legends about angry spirits living inside hills that spit fire. Think of the Greek god Hephaestus hammering away in his underground forge, the Polynesian fire queen Pele dancing with lava, or the Japanese blaze baby Kagutsuchi born from a burst of flames, all tied to mountains blowing their tops. When diggers and timeline trackers matched up old blow-ups with the birth of these stories, they saw how many lined right up, with whole groups of people staring wide-eyed as peaks exploded, skies turned black with ash, and the ground shook like a giant's footsteps. Without fancy tools to measure it all, those folks turned the terror into sacred tales, their way of making sense of powers way bigger than them. In a funny twist, those yarns aren't off the mark at all. They're like front-row reports wrapped in awe and magic, turning raw fear into something beautiful and lasting. Even the sky stories from way back often nail things that today's stargazers confirm with a wink. Old communities described how stars, wandering lights, and shooting rocks moved across the night with flowery words that match what we see through telescopes now. Down in Australia, Aboriginal star patterns still guide folks through seasons for finding food or paths, as spot-on as ever. Across the seas in the Americas, the Maya folks followed Venus and Mars so closely that their timekeeping setups could stand toe-to-toe with our computers. Greek legends about hunters like Orion, or heroes like Perseus, and princesses like Andromeda lock in star groups just as they twinkled thousands of years back. Plug them into our sky apps, and boom, it's like opening a time capsule of the heavens frozen in epic poems. Then there's the never-ending buzz about vanished places, the stuff that tugs at our hearts like a lost puppy, spots like Atlantis, Lemuria, or Mu, names heavy with longing for worlds we can't touch anymore. Plato's famous splash about Atlantis grabs the spotlight, but heaps of older crowds had their own takes on fancy islands zapped by waves or flames. What gets researchers all excited is how these whispers often nod to real times, when the Earth threw tantrums, with big chunks of land really slipping under the drink. Think of the huge flat spots in Southeast Asia's Sunda Shelf, the deep bowl in the Caribbean, or the bumpy North Atlantic ridge, all once bustling with shores and folks, now ghost towns under the sea since the ice times wrapped up. People back then would have seen their homes gulped down by the ocean in just a couple of lifetimes, turning survivors into starters of fresh clans, hauling bits of forgotten smarts to new spots. Sure, not every wild tale slots perfectly into a science book, some pile on extra dreams over core truths, but the habit sticks out. Legends hang on to memories way after the dirt evidence washes away. Mouth-to-mouth cultures especially pack handy know-how into fun stories, like a sneaky serpent in the stream warning about killer rapids, or a grumpy god smacking down pride as a nudge about keeping nature in check, or a shiny lost era hinting at good times before a big bad hit. Science tiptoes into these yarns not to say they're word for word true, but to peek at what sharp-eyed humans noticed way back. Checks on Aboriginal Australian tales show they sketch old beach lines from 12,000 years ago, before the seas redrew the map, handed down fresh through tons of family chats like no book ever could. Polynesian sailing songs hide star charts and wave paths that match our satellite maps today, proving they were life-saving guides dressed as tunes, not silly make-believe. When these old yarns and fresh facts bump into each other halfway, it's like chatting across ages. Science rolls up with rulers and scopes. Myths bring the unbroken thread of heart-tugging recall. One dishes out sizes and counts, the other sprinkles in why it all matters, weaving together a fuller picture that shows our past isn't a boring straight road, but a twisty rope of spotting stuff, dodging doom, and holding on to the echoes. Lately, diggers of old stuff, weather wizards and people studiers have teamed up with indigenous talekeepers and wise old folks to piece together neighbourhood backstories, nailing down bits that seem too wild to be real, like volcano blasts timed to the exact bunch of grandparents in a legend, shore edges recalled from when they stretched way out to sea, or star spots described bang on as they shone ages ago. It turns out myths are like a tough zip file for info, stuffing knowledge into beats, pictures and repeats that stick in our brains naturally. And sometimes, the way these stories line up with proof gets too spot on to chalk up to luck, like mentions of twinklers or sky shows that match spots we can now pin to dates way back, setups that haven't shown up for tens of thousands of years, whispering that maybe our ancestors were jotting down the universe in their own clever code all along. The ancient Egyptian story of Osiris and Isis echoes the way the stars in Orion's belt rise alongside the bright star Sirius, happening long before the time we usually think of as Egypt's recorded history. Imagine this, a tale of death, rebirth, and the heavens aligning, passed down through generations like a cosmic whisper from the distant past. Over in South America, the Inca legends speak of a god named Viracocha who appeared right after a massive flood wiped everything clean. This divine figure rose up to share secrets of building grand structures and mapping the stars with the people who survived. It's strikingly like the old Mesopotamian stories from the other side of the globe, where a being called Huans did exactly the same thing, emerging from the waters to give humanity knowledge of construction and the night sky. These overlapping tales might just come from that deep human urge we all share, the need to believe that our clever ways of living were handed down from some mysterious otherworldly source, like a present from the gods themselves. But what if there's more to it? These similarities could point to something bigger, a shared inheritance from an even older, hidden chapter in our world's story. Think about how memories cling to life through spoken words and songs, outlasting even the sturdier stones that crumble under time's weight. Languages twist and change slowly over the ages, but the raw feelings woven into them, wonder, terror, deep respect, keep the core messages pure and untouched. Picture families gathering around fires season after season, retelling the same epic adventures. Those stories become like living creatures, protecting themselves by staying true to key details, the exact moment when stars wink into view, or the thunderous roar of crashing waves. A single vivid element like that can remain spot on for thousands upon thousands of years, because the whole tale hinges on it. In this sneaky way, myths sneak facts into our hearts without ever labelling them as cold, hard truth. They breathe life into history, keeping it warm and alive. Of course, some experts in science push back against mixing these dreamy legends with solid proof, and they have good reason to be cautious. It's easy to spot patterns where none exist, blurring the edge between real clues and wild daydreams. Yet time and again, myths have lit the path for amazing breakthroughs. Take Heinrich Schliemann, who chased the poetic lines of Homer's Iliad straight to the buried ruins of Troy, unearthing a city that many thought was pure fantasy. Or the diggers in Crete who leaned on ancient whispers about King Minos to reveal the sprawling palace at Knossos, with its maze-like halls and colourful frescoes. Even hunts for fallen meteors and age-old craters have followed trails blazed by native people's accounts of fiery streaks blazing across the heavens. In each case, the old stories waved like flags, signalling the way long before maps or machines could prove them right. Maybe it's not that myths foresee science, but that both tap into the same hidden river of reality, one flowing with heart-stirring emotions, the other with sharp, logical analysis. When our planet shakes with a huge event, a cataclysmic flood or a sky-shattering impact, people weave it into narratives that endure far beyond the fading footprints in the dirt. So, when modern tools finally dig up the evidence, it hits like rediscovering a long-lost family heirloom. If there really was an early civilization that rose and fell before we knew to write it down, its echoes might not hide in crumbling walls or forgotten cities. Instead, they could pulse through the myths that stubbornly cling to life across eras. Over countless years, the finer points might morph. Heroes swap names like costumes, landscapes twist into new shapes, but the beating heart of the story, a shining realm of wisdom shattered by disaster, stays beating strong. Atlantis, that famous sunken paradise, could be just one flavour of this timeless motif, a poetic placeholder for all the worlds our Earth has swallowed and forgotten. These legends endure because they touch something raw inside us, the dread of everything vanishing and the ache to hold on to what matters most. In this dance, science and folklore become partners in piecing together our forgotten yesterdays. Science burrows deep, sifting through soil, ice, and fossils like a determined detective. Folklore soars high, passing wisdom from elder to child like a relay race through time. When they align, the veil lifts for a heartbeat, revealing the past as clear as a mirror on calm waters. We glimpse not just what truly happened, but how it was cherished and retold, the facts and feelings blending seamlessly. That magical overlap nudges our curiosity further. Instead of asking if it all occurred, we wonder what deeper truths we're unearthing from our collective soul. Perhaps these so-called myths are humanity's own layered archive, much like the Earth's rocky diary that logs volcanoes and vanishings. Stories stack up fears, victories, and breakthroughs in emotional layers, just as stones etch out the planet's dramas. As we poke deeper into this blend of hard facts and soft tales, we see that the wall between history and legend is full of cracks, letting ideas seep through. Every fresh find about our distant ancestors seems to rhyme with whispers from ancient yarns. The Great Deluge, the vanished homeland, the celestial visitors, the fresh start for humankind. It's all part of an endless loop, etched into both our world's bones and our shared dreams. So, maybe our job isn't to pull science and legend apart, but to let them weave together. Science grounds us with checks and balances. Legend ties us to our roots with threads of meaning. One hunts for tangible signs in the wide world. The other searches our inner landscapes for unbroken chains. United, they could unveil the full picture, a truth that embraces the stuff we can weigh and count, alongside the echoes we sense in our bones. And as this gentle quest rolls on, tracking the faint marks of bygone eras through numbers and narratives alike, a fresh puzzle bubbles up. If these old myths safeguard genuine recollections, what other treasures might they hide? Could they tuck away guides, scraps of wisdom designed to outlast any apocalypse? If that's the case, those long-gone pioneers might have bequeathed more than dusty relics and bedtime stories. Perhaps they slipped in blueprints, clever notions tucked into symbols and sagas, patiently awaiting our clever eyes to unravel them. This trail beckons us forward, toward the notion that our predecessors were far more than mere spinners of yarns. They could have been masterful creators, thinkers, stargazers, and wisdom seekers whose genius still shapes our world, camouflaged right under our noses. To uncover them, we'll need to peer beyond books and sacred sites, straight into the clever designs of their creations, the impossible feats of engineering and know-how that outshine their supposed era by leaps and bounds. The deeper we dive into the old ruins scattered across our planet, the more they start to feel like tricky puzzles waiting to be solved, rather than just broken leftovers from long ago. These ancient spots show such amazing skill, toughness, and careful planning that it's hard to brush them off as simple work done by people with basic tools. But if we believe what we've learned about the past, these things shouldn't look the way they do. They seem way too advanced for their time. The big mystery lurking in the shadows isn't only about who made them or what they were for, but the biggest head-scratcher is simply how they pulled it off. That one little word packs in hundreds of years of amazement and curiosity. Picture this. How on earth did our long-gone relatives shift huge chunks of rock weighing 100 tons without any big lifting machines or powerful motors? How did they slice through super hard granite as if it was squishy dough? And how did they create buildings lined up so perfectly with the stars and directions that even today's top builders pause and scratch their heads before trying to copy them? Over the years, people have come up with all sorts of ideas to explain it, from wild stories full of imagination to smart calculations based on math and science, and even tales pulled from old myths or grounded in real-world physics. Some folks talk about secret inventions that got lost along the way, while others point to the clever tricks of huge groups of workers who watched and learned from nature. But the closer we peek, the bigger the puzzle grows, pulling us in deeper with every new find that shows a level of smarts that doesn't match the time period we've stuck it in. Maybe we've been selling those ancient folks short, thinking they weren't as clever as us, or perhaps, in a twist that's even more mind-blowing, they were borrowing tricks from even older groups who lived before them. The idea of these lost builders doesn't have to involve space visitors from other planets or magical powers. It could be something way more down to earth and yet totally astonishing. Just regular people, a lot like you and me, who figured out amazing ways to do things that later folks forgot all about. Think of human history not as a straight path marching forward, but as a bumpy ride with ups and downs, like ocean waves that crash in, wipe everything clean, and then roll back to start fresh. Skills and know-how build up, then tumble down in tough times, only to sprout up again somewhere else. The very first clever builders might not have been the absolute beginning of humankind, but they could have been the ones who first saw our world as a giant playground. They could shape on purpose, with exact measurements and smart ideas. When you stroll through the leftover bits of places like Baalbek in Lebanon, that feeling hits you right away, like a whisper from the past. There, a huge temple area rests on top of enormous stone bases, with some blocks tipping the scales at more than 1,000 tons apiece. One giant rock, nicknamed the Stone of the Pregnant Woman, is still half stuck in the ground where they started cutting it out, like it got paused mid-job. Even with all our fancy gadgets today, picking up and moving those monsters would be a massive headache. But way back, thousands of years in the past, some group not only chopped them free but set them down exactly right in the base, levelled out so smooth and even it's almost unreal. Later on, the Romans came along and added their own temples on top, but it seems like even those mighty empire builders looked at the older stones with a mix of awe and confusion, treating them like leftovers from a smarter time they could respect but not quite match. This kind of jaw-dropping work pops up all over the globe, like echoes of the same clever thinking in far-flung spots. Over in Egypt, the massive granite pieces inside the king's chamber of the Great Pyramid snuggle together so tight you couldn't squeeze a thin sheet of paper between the cracks. In Peru, at a place called Sacsayhuaman, weirdly shaped stones lock into each other like bits of a giant jigsaw puzzle, each side curved just a tiny bit to hug its neighbours perfectly. Down at Pumapunku, huge blocks made of a tough rock called andesite have fancy slots, pathways and sharp corners that look like they were whipped up by some high-tech machine. In India, the old stepwells in Gujarat plunge hundreds of feet below the surface in twisting, balanced spirals that have hung tough through 1,000 years of ground-shaking quakes without crumbling. And in Cambodia, the stones at Angkor Wat, dragged from quarries miles and miles away, click together so spot on that they didn't need any sticky stuff to hold them in place. These spots don't share the same traditions or even happen around the same time, but they all scream out with that same spotless accuracy, like a secret code from creators who really got the basics of how heavy things press down, how stuff bends under force, and how materials hold up over ages. When today's experts poke around these old wonders, they spot stuff that goes way beyond pretty designs. It's like the stones were placed with a plan that's almost alive. They're not just thrown together, they're fine-tuned, like instruments in a band. Some seem set up to spread out the shakes from earthquakes so the whole thing doesn't topple, others guide rainwater away to stop flooding, and a bunch fight off the slow wear from wind and weather. It's as if those long-ago makers knew buildings had to dance with the Earth's twists and turns to last. In places like Japan and South America, big stone setups use this interlocking style with odd-shaped blocks that give a little wiggle during tremors, keeping everything standing tall. That's not lucky guessing, that's real brainy know-how. And since it shows up on totally opposite sides of the world, it hints at either a shared family tree of ideas or different groups stumbling onto the same smart trick all on their own. Then there's this cool forgotten skill with sounds, where lots of old holy spots make noises bigger or echo, in special ways that feel planned out. Take the underground halls at Halsaflieni in Malta, hollowed out entirely below ground more than 5,000 years back. They buzz at a certain pitch that tingles through your body. If someone sings or chants inside, the whole room vibrates, hitting you with waves that almost feel like a touch. Over at the Mayan pyramid of Kukulkan, slapping your hands in front makes a bounce-back sound just like the call of their holy Quetzal bird, all thanks to the clever steps shaping the echo. Egyptian rooms, Incan barriers, and even those stone rings in Britain show off this sound-savvy setup. These weren't happy accidents from building shapes. They were on-purpose picks by folks who knew exactly how noise travels and bounces around spaces. This sparks the big wonder. How did they pick up on all that? Without fancy labs, books on sound waves or physics classes, how did they nail down such exact stuff? The easiest guess is they tried things out over and over, with whole families of builders watching, tweaking and passing tips along. But that sort of trial and error needs a steady chain, like a long-lasting school of secrets handed down without breaks. We know from stories of the past how fragile that chain can be. Big book collections go up in flames, mighty kingdoms crash down, and spoken tales whisper away into nothing. What if the real start of that wisdom goes back way further than the groups we give credit to? Even trickier are the gadgets they used, or really, the fact that we can't find many. Diggers have turned up soft copper tools near Egyptian rock pits, but that stuff would wear out super fast on tough granite. At spots like Giza and Aswan, you see dead straight slices and drilled holes in rock that today would need diamond edges or buzzing machines. The cuts are so sleek even, and twisty, that basic scraping or weak metal couldn't do it. Ideas float around about mystery metals or wild tricks with shaking sounds. In fresh tests, today's tinkerers have played with sound waves to lift or carve rock without much rubbing. It's fun to dream that those old-timers found easy versions of that, ways so smooth they barely left clues, then got wiped from memory after big disasters or just falling out of use. These ancient feats also shine with map-making and star-watching that feels downright scientific, like they had a grasp on the sky and land that's hard to believe. The Giza crew, for instance, pointed their big builds not just to north, south, east, west, but to star spots that lit up the night 12,000 years in the past. The pyramid setup copies the shape of Orion's belt, and the Nile's bends mimic the Milky Way's glow. In South America, drawn lines and tall markers line up with sun highs, moon phases, and even the pull of magnets. This stuff points to seeing the whole world as a big, moving machine that spins, shifts, and repeats. That deep seeing usually comes from years of staring up or from handed-down maps. In tons of old tales, smarts like this come from earlier beings, godlike teachers, wise wanderers, or master makers who show up after bad times to fix things up. The Sumerians thanked the Anunnaki, Egyptians bowed to Thoth, Mayans praised Kukulkan, and Incas hailed Viracocha. Each group painted these helpers as smart, people-shaped, and full of tricks. They shared farming, writing, number crunching, and stacking stones, not as bosses but as guides. Whether real folks or story symbols, these yarns might nod to the same true event, leftover smart survivors sharing bits after a wipeout. To the new crowds, their skills would look like good stuff. That's the spooky spark in the forgotten builder's tale, that what we tag as civilization's kickoff was really a fresh start, a hunt for lost know-how that once covered the earth but got blown apart. If a whole older world tumbled, it could have sent out roaming experts, stone shapers, sky watchers, healers, who taught scraps to simple gatherers rebuilding. Those bits turned into legends, ceremonies, and giant builds. As time ticked on, the how-to stuck around, but where it came from blurred out. The learners lost track of their mentors' names. We see this happen in smaller bursts even now, like when old recipes for super strong Roman mix, twisty Damascus blades, or fiery Greek flames vanish. Not because they're impossible, but because they're picky about stuff, spots, and hidden steps kept by tiny crews. When those crews fade, poof, the skill's gone. Stretch that over thousands of years and you can picture whole chunks of science vanishing after a world-shaking mess. If those early whizzes were real, they might have stamped their style not just in big piles, but in sneaky rules that linger in our heads. Shapes, balance, perfect proportions. They pop up in what we make because they feel right, even if we don't know why. That special golden split shows in old holy spots, fancy paintings from hundreds of years back, and today's tall towers. Maybe it's a built-in gut feeling, or maybe it's a hand-me-down, the faint ring of lessons so ancient they've woven into how we think. Even growing food hints at this lost cleverness, with the oldest water channels in Mesopotamia and the Indus Valley showing they knew about pushing water and dirt chemistry. Up in the Andes, stepped fields tweak heat and wet in tiny weather zones. So good we can barely beat them now. Some Indian wells from way back pull fresh water through built-in stone filters that clean as they go. These aren't just lucky tries. They're polished perfection, born from testing, fixing and tracking changes, measured in growing seasons instead of computer charts. Peering at history this way swaps out pure riddles for a connected story, where the same itch to explore that fuels our labs fires up those old stackers. The drive to build lasting stuff, to get nature's ways, to mix beauty with usefulness. Those vanished whizzes might not be totally gone, their smarts could be sprinkled through the bones of our world. Or here's a softer, deeper thought. Maybe the original pros didn't lean on gadgets like we do. Their power might have come from getting nature's pushes so well they teamed up with them, not fought. Picture using echoes to shift rocks, vibes to mold stuff, or earth pulls to steer plans. Tricks like that wouldn't leave junk behind, but their handiwork could stand forever. Our science today is dipping our toes into that, from rock hums to soft shaping without big energy, each finding inching us toward grasping how they did the impossible without the stuff we'd grabbed first. If we could chat with them across time, they might say tools aren't always clunky machines, that moving forward doesn't need iron and sparks. It could be about blending in, tapping the world's beats as helpers. Their gift might not be dusty gadgets, but the big idea behind, the planet's a toolkit, and tuning into its songs lets you craft wonders. We like to see growth as a one-way street, but maybe it's a loop spinning round. Those forgotten pros weren't the starters, they were just one turn in an endless wheel. Every bunch of errors know-how piles up, hits a high, then crashes back. The next bunch finds it again, slapping a new label on. Tomorrow's makers might gawk at our sky-high towers and puzzle the same. How'd they manage? Right now, hints of their touch linger in rocks that shrug off wear, walls that sing with noise, lines that chase stars gone dim. Each old pile is a soft note through ages, whispering that smart minds trod here once. We might not catch their words or names, but their ideas shine through. They chased forever in a fading world, aiming to drop marks tougher than recall. As we trace their steps, it's more than cracking build riddles. It's rekindling a bond with the ground they might have nailed better than us, seeing making as a partnership, not a boss fight. That grasp could be their real handoff, the hidden gem under all the rock and tales. And as we chase their clues, the wonder swells. With such forward thinking, did they peek ahead? Did they tuck hints for us, not scratched warnings, but shapes, points, and secrets to spot when we're ripe to notice? If you ever dreamed of chatting with people way off in the future, not just someone living a single year or even 10 years from now, but intelligent beings thousands of years ahead, how would you pull that off? These folks might not speak your language, recognize your symbols, or even think in the same way you do. How could you bridge such a massive gap across time? A simple book would rot away after just a few hundred years. A recording on tape or disc would rust and break down. Even a satellite floating in space would wander off course and eventually crash back down. No matter how tough you make something, time wears it down slowly but surely, like a gentle but unstoppable force. The only thing that truly stands the test of time is the planet itself: solid rock, rich dirt, perfect shapes, and the endless sky above. Maybe that's why people from long ago pick those elements, not only to construct big things, but to whisper secrets through them. Imagine if an early group of smart folk saw their own world crumbling and decided to pass on a gift. Not fancy statues to bow down to, but helpful guides or gentle nudges. They probably figured their clever ideas would get lost, memories would shatter like glass, and one day a whole new bunch of people would show up, poking around the leftover bits and wondering what it all meant. To connect with those strangers, the old builders would need a way to talk that skipped words altogether. Numbers, balanced sizes, and repeating designs could serve as their special code. Like an alphabet anyone could figure out if they paid attention. All over the globe, these old stone giants seem to shout the same quiet lesson. Keep your eyes on the heavens, watch the repeating loops of seasons, and notice how the ground and the stars stay in harmony. The massive pyramid in Egypt aims straight north, lining up with the world's spinning center as if it's boldly announcing this spot unlocks real wisdom. Far away, the stepped temples of the Maya people track the moments when day and night balance perfectly, showing later generations exactly when the planet shifts its mood. Circles of huge rocks in other places highlight the longest and shortest days of the year, proving that you can measure the flow of days without any fancy gadgets. These aren't random lucky breaks. They're like frozen school lessons built right into the walls and floors, every straight line pointing to a star, every carefully measured side, every shadow that falls just right on a special day. It's all a sneaky way to share ideas. The hidden words say something like, "We figured this out, and we hoped you'd discover it someday too." A few smart thinkers even picture these far-flung old sites as pieces of a giant puzzle covering the whole world, each one adding a clue to a bigger picture. Take those mysterious lines scratched into the dry ground in Peru. They stretch for miles and miles, shaping straight edges and animal figures that only make sense when you're soaring high above. Their huge size doesn't add up unless you're looking down from the clouds, sparking all sorts of wild guesses. But what if they weren't drawn for sky gods or modern airplanes? Maybe the creators made them tough and basic on purpose, so wind and rain couldn't wipe them away, and their true meaning would click only when people reinvented flying machines. Perhaps those ancient artists trusted that time would hand us the right viewpoint eventually. Digging deeper, the way these old places are arranged hints at a purposeful chat across ages. The three big pyramids near the Nile River copy the layout of three bright stars in a famous constellation, and that same starry setup pops up in stonework scattered everywhere else. Some curious explorers suggest these matchups weren't just pretty symbols but actual signposts, linking spots on the ground to spots in the night sky. In that view, the secret isn't about praying to twinkling lights, but about grasping the big cosmic machine. A society clever enough to line things up that way was basically dropping a timeless address in the universe, a steady marker amid all the swirling changes. If we buy into that notion, then these crumbling wonders might be way more than graves for kings or houses for spirits. They could be clever storage boxes for ideas, holding facts in the way shapes fit together and sizes compare. That famous Egyptian pyramid, for example, hides math tricks like the number pi and the full circle around our world, plus how far we sit from the sun. Whether by happy accident or smart planning, these built-in connections tie everyday building to rules that rule everywhere. The designers clearly knew some numbers stay the same forever, speaking clearly to any sharp mind, no matter how many suns have risen since. That's why they're perfect for carrying important news that lasts. Today's brainy types have experimented with the same trick. When we launched those Explorer spaceships out beyond our neighbourhood, we stuck golden discs on them packed with basics about our home, our spot pinpointed by pulsing stars, a sketch of nearby planets, what our air is made of, and noises from birds to bustling cities. Everything got wrapped in math and unchanging science facts, the one tongue we bet strange far-off thinkers would get. Now picture an old society pulling a similar stunt right here on the ground, not with flying metal, but with unmovable rock. They could have woven in details about our world, star paths, and physics rules into structures built to survive huge disasters. What grabs you about this wild thought is that we spot clues of it already. Loads of those early holy places, pointy towers, and giant stone slabs weave in measurements that match how planets dance, the slight slant of our spinning ball, and the moon's monthly moods. The makers didn't just aim their walls at distant lights, they baked the sky's rules into the very lengths and widths. So you end up with buildings that moonlight as teaching tools, sharing lessons through their outlines instead of carved letters. Even if every spoken word vanished, the wisdom would stick around, waiting to be noticed. Some of these grand old spots might even bottle up the idea of time in a bottle. The Maya folks dreamed up a calendar that counts enormous loops called baktuns, each one lasting more than 5,000 years. The massive temple complex in Cambodia plays with numbers tied to starry eras in a similar way. Over in Egypt, that famous half-lion statue stares straight east, welcoming the morning light as it wanders through animal-shaped star groups over thousands upon thousands of years. Each perfect lineup shifts bit by bit with the slow wobble of seasons, like a gigantic timer set to click once every 26,000 years. That kind of pinpoint accuracy points to a note saved for kids way down the line, maybe flagging when the next big shift or world-shaking event rolls around. Even the tall tales wrapped around these stones often feel like sneaky how-to guides dressed up as adventures. An old Egyptian guidebook for the afterlife spells out dodging traps and trials to reach forever land, each step matching real star clusters and directions on a map. Maya story scrolls chat about worlds getting made and wrecked in patterns that mirror sky shows. In ancient Indian tales, gods stand in for wandering planets, and epic fights copy the sun's high points and moon's dark moments. These links aren't tossed in by chance. They hint that stories, stone piles, and number games once teamed up as a full package, a clever setup for saving and sharing star wisdom across families and ages. But if these really were hidden notes, who was supposed to read them? Some folks say sky beings, others the gone before us, or maybe us newcomers. Perhaps those labels all blend into one, the future staring back. The creators might have sensed their way of life fading out but believed a fresh wave would crash in. They couldn't save their chatter, but they could tuck away their smarts. So every towering rock turns into a postcard for the next finder, murmuring, "We stood here once, we grasped this bit of truth." Don't overlook that such whispers don't scream out loud. Being tricky might be the whole game. If the aim was to hide the full scoop until a society got wise enough to relearn science stuff, then stuffing it into twisty shapes makes perfect sense. A basic group might spot just a shady spot to prey, a sharper future bunch could uncover a star chart, a mini-model of planet swings, or a heads-up about repeating disasters. It's the same smart thinking we use now for marking spots with glowing waste that lasts forever, shapes screaming "stay away" to crowds 10,000 years ahead. The warning skips words, leaning on basic forms and watchful vibes. In a funny twist, those long-gone planners might have wrestled with our same puzzle. How do you make smart stick around? We stash ours in glowing screens and invisible clouds, way flimsier than hard rock. One big sunburp or wobbly magnet could zap it all clean. But perfect shapes don't need plugs, and boulders skip upkeep. If their note is real, it was crafted to beat every tongue, kingdom, and living thing. We might be cracking it open without even knowing, every time we scan an old heap and gasp at its sky smarts, piecing together their story. Each repeat of the same balanced number across lands echoes their strong point. Bit by bit, we're getting the full tale. Maybe their words weren't about dodging doom or seeing ahead, but about keeping the chain unbroken, whispering that once you snag a truth, it shouldn't slip away for good. A handful of dreamers even think the ground under our feet joins the chat, that these spots hug earthquake cracks, magnetic hotspots, and invisible lines to calm the world's wild energy, like early tweaks to nature based on teamwork instead of bossing it around. Hard to nail down, but the idea sparks wonder, painting a picture where building blends with the living world, every wall dancing to the planet's beat. If that's spot on, their nudge to us boils down to this: learn to create alongside the wild, not wrestling it down. These days, we're circling back to that old school know-how. Builders peek at ancient tricks to craft stuff that shakes off quakes and swims through floods better than shiny new towers. Lab folks pick apart recipes for concrete from way back that fixes its own cracks with natural fizz. Growers dust off watering ways from ages ago that sip sparingly. Each fresh aha is like answering a call from the past, not with scribbles, but with sturdy setups that last. If that early crowd did plant clues on purpose, it might not be a lone rock or secret symbol, but the web of spots worldwide, all humming the same tune. Glued together, they scribble a message across the whole ball we call home, too sprawly to spot up close, shining only when you zoom out with maps. That way the plea might be to gaze at the big view. Don't poke one broken wall alone. Link them up. When you do, the design pops out. And what whispers that design? Maybe that everything spins in loops, societies blooming and wilting to the pulse of our shared home, each leaving breadcrumbs for the follow-up act. Or perhaps that being smart isn't a finish line, but an ongoing adventure, the world remaking it through creatures like us. Those makers couldn't halt the clock, but they could groove with it, sketching not a trail through places, but through clever thoughts. Flip it another way, and maybe they weren't chatting with strangers like us, but with their own rebooted selves after a big wipeout. They might have guessed the seas would swell, brains would blank, and people would start fresh without a clue. So they planted memory joggers, betting that when smarts bloomed again, somebody would spot the echo, feel that weird, "I've seen this," and grasp that the wheels turned before. Not a scary alert or crystal ball peak, but a cosy pat saying lapses in memory don't last and wisdom always bounces back. Zoom out and we're mirroring them today. Our sky eyes, far-flung explorers, hidden info stashes and webby networks are all postcards to tomorrow or whatever finds them. We're etching our grasp into the world's skin with wires and waves instead of chisels. Maybe that's the habit of thinking beings everywhere. They stack stuff to hold on to yesterdays. Like the ones before, we can't guess who'll pick up our trail or if it'll click. If those ancient crafters could peek at us now, zapping beams and buzzing flyers over their handiwork, rediscovering the lines they drew, they'd probably grin, mission accomplished, even if the echo took 12,000 years to boomerang back. As we keep tuning in, it dawns that their hints might skip the nuts and bolts stuff for deeper musings. The real heart might not boast, "We were super smart," but we knew where we fit. Every soaring pillar, etched groove and star-locked angle could nudge something basic and deep. We're threads in a vast weave. True lasting comes from sinking dirt, clouds and thoughts in sweet balance. And perhaps that's the gem worth chasing. After all the puzzle-solving wild guesses and back and forth, what sticks is this. They craved to echo on, and they nudged us to recall our own spark, that we're fleeting yet full of wonder. The world might erase our labels, but cherish our imprints, and the sparks we scatter will kindle in fresh hands, just as theirs ignite ours now. When a big society comes to an end, it does not happen suddenly like a big bang or a quick flash. The planet keeps spinning around as usual, the twinkling lights in the night sky stay shining brightly, and the gentle breeze continues to flow through the trees without stopping. Instead, what starts to disappear little by little is the lively buzz of people making things, the steady beat of hard work being done every day, and the shared ideas that once linked countless brains together in chasing the same dreams and goals. This quietness sneaks in gently, much like the soft evening shadows that stretch longer and longer across a wide open field until the whole place feels calm and hushed. It shows up in small ways that nobody really pays attention to at first, such as an empty workshop where tools gather dust, a forgotten library with doors locked tight against the wind, or a broken bridge that nobody bothers to fix anymore because everyone is too busy or too tired. Then, one ordinary morning, the bustling city stirs awake for what turns out to be its very last time, but nobody realizes it yet, and life goes on as if nothing has changed. Every great group of people from the past has faced this kind of growing quietness in their own unique way, like a slow fade-out in a beautiful song that once filled the air with energy. Take the ancient Maya people, for example, who created detailed calendars that tracked huge stretches of time like epic adventures unfolding across the years. Their grand cities, full of towering pyramids and intricate carvings, eventually got swallowed up by thick, tangled jungles that grew wild and unchecked, hiding their wonders under layers of green leaves and vines. Or think about the mighty Romans, who were so sure their vast empire would last forever and ever, building huge arenas where crowds cheered for gladiators and plays. But in the end, those massive stone structures crumbled bit by bit into the ground, becoming ruins overgrown with weeds and visited only by curious animals, even the clever folks from the Indus Valley, whose towns had such smartly designed streets with proper drainage systems that today's builders still look at them in amazement and learn from their plans, simply disappeared without leaving much behind, like a whisper lost in the wind. Not a single one of these societies ever thought their time would run out. People always believe their world is too strong to fade away. But no matter how confident they feel, that peaceful quietness finds its way eventually, wrapping everything in a blanket of stillness. What turns this quietness into something so deep and total is not just things breaking apart or getting wrecked, but the slow process of everyone forgetting what it all meant, like an old family story that gets told less and less until nobody remembers the details anymore. The actual buildings and objects might stick around for a while, such as chunks of stone walls, broken pieces of colourful pottery, or faded carvings on rocks that once told important tales. However, the real understanding of why they were made and what they stood for slips away over time, fading like morning mist under the warm sun. Later on, new groups of people stumble upon these leftover bits and give them fresh names or meanings that fit their own ideas, turning a sacred temple where rituals happened into just an old burial spot, or mistaking a clever invention like an ancient tool for something holy to worship. As years turn into generations, the original reason for creating these things melts away completely, getting replaced by exciting legends and a sense of magical wonder that sparks imagination. In this magical shift, a piece of the old world dies out, but at the same time something brand new and full of possibility comes to life, like a phoenix rising from ashes. The real history morphs into thrilling myths passed down around campfires, and the heavy quietness transforms into an intriguing puzzle that begs to be solved. Now picture if there was a very first society before all the others we know about, one that started everything, and maybe scattered hidden hints all over the globe like buried treasures waiting to be found. If that happened, their quietness after falling apart must have been enormous, like the whole world taking a giant deep breath and starting fresh. It would feel like the entire planet hitting a reset button, with huge oceans swelling up to cover lands, dark clouds filling the skies and blocking out the sun, and once thriving cities getting wiped clean as if they never existed. Trying to wrap your mind around it is like thinking about time itself slowing down for a moment to catch its wind. What sort of amazing place would that have been, with inventions and knowledge far beyond what we can guess? And how much effort or disaster would it really take to wipe away almost every sign of such a smart group of people? Surprisingly, maybe not as much as you might expect, because our home planet is incredibly good at covering up the past and making things disappear naturally over time. In just a few hundred years, the wild side of nature takes back control with ease, like an unstoppable force that nobody can hold off forever. Paved roads crack and fall apart under the pressure of growing roots, lush forests sprout up where buildings once stood tall, shiny metals get eaten away by rust until they look dull and weak, and even strong glass shatters into tiny specks that mix with the sand. Jump ahead 10,000 years from now, and hardly anything humans have constructed would look familiar anymore, buried under fresh layers of dirt and forgotten by the changing landscape. Our tallest skyscrapers, those giants reaching for the clouds, would crumble down into lumpy hills of junk, hidden beneath new earth formed by wind and rain. Stretch that out to 100,000 years, and even the massive landmasses we call continents would have moved around slowly on the planet's shifting plates, reshaping the world entirely. Freezing ice, whipping winds and flowing waters would smooth away every clue that we ever lived here, leaving behind a clean slate. Only the toughest stuff, like solid rocks or certain hardy metals, might hang on a bit longer, but even those would get worn down smooth and shapeless by the endless grind of time. It makes you feel small and thoughtful to understand that the planet's quietness is not hollow or scary. It's full of calm patience, like a wise old friend waiting quietly for the next burst of activity to start up again. If that very first society really did collapse long ago, The quiet period that followed could have stretched on for thousands upon thousands of years, giving the world plenty of time to heal and change. Thick woods would spread over the crumbled remains of their homes, mighty rivers would carve new paths through the land, ignoring the old ones, and the weather would swing between warm spells and chilly ones, reshaping everything in subtle ways. All sorts of plants and animals would carry on living without a care, adapting and thriving in the new environment as if nothing big had happened. Then, when fresh groups of humans started appearing and building their lives, they would discover a planet that already seemed ancient and mysterious, dotted with odd shapes and structures that did not fit into their understanding. They might spot those leftover pieces from the past and scratch their heads, wondering who could have created such things with skill and purpose. Without knowing it, they could even construct their own towns right on top of the buried foundations, walking every day over hidden layers of forgotten memories that whispered secrets from below. Experts who dig up the past have a special word for this stacking up of history over time. They call it a palimpsest, which is like a piece of paper that's been written on, scrubbed clean, and then written on again, but with faint hints of the old words still peeking through if you look closely enough. Our whole planet is like one gigantic palimpsest, with every society adding its own story to the same shared canvas, and each one convinced that theirs is the very first and most important chapter. But those quiet gaps between the stories are not just empty spaces or missing parts. They are like expectant pauses, full of potential and ready for the next tale to unfold. The planet clings to those soft echoes from before, holding them safe until some curious soul figures out how to tune in and hear them once more, bringing the old wisdom back to life in a fresh way. Try to imagine what that deep quietness must have felt like for the few people who survived the downfall of their world, hanging on as everything they knew slipped away. Picture yourself as one of those last remaining folks, watching the sky turn strange colours that you've never seen before, with seasons becoming wild and unpredictable, so that planting crops or hunting feels like a gamble every time. The edges of the land where it meets the sea keep pulling back farther each year, swallowing up homes and fields in salty waves. You would hold on to bits and pieces of old knowledge that no longer help in this changed place, like secret recipes for making strong metals that you cannot find the ingredients for anymore, or detailed drawings of the stars hidden behind thick layers of smoky ash from disasters. Charts of the heavens that once guided ships now seem useless because the machines to read them are broken and gone. You would share what you remember with your kids around flickering fires at night, but without the right tools or the full background story, those facts would twist and turn into fanciful tales passed down like bedtime stories. Long ago, the world was bright with endless lights, you might say, and our great-grandparents could talk directly to the skies and get answers back. Over many lifetimes, those simple explanations would bloom into grand myths about powerful gods and enchanting magic that explained the wonders of the universe. That quietness would not feel completely empty or lonely. Instead, it would buzz with half-forgotten words and ideas bouncing around, ready to light up the next morning with new hope. In lots of ways, we're still living inside that same echo today, feeling its gentle vibrations in our bones without always knowing why. Think about all the old stories from around the world about massive floods that washed everything away, or legends of a perfect golden time when life was easy and full of joy, or tales of divine beings coming down from the heavens to share secrets with humans. Each one could be that ancient quietness reaching out to us through blurry memories handed down across countless generations. The long stretches of stillness between different societies do not wipe out all the old wisdom forever. They boil it down to its purest form, like concentrating a flavourful soup until only the essence remains. Hard facts turn into meaningful symbols that people can relate to. Complicated math formulas become sacred rituals performed with care, and amazing inventions morph into inspiring stories about strength, harmony, and the careful balance of nature. When a brand new society pops up after a quiet time, those symbols spark fresh curiosity and wonder, kicking off the whole cycle once more with renewed energy and ideas. People often see quietness as a sad loss, like something precious slipping through your fingers forever, but it also opens up room for exciting new beginnings and discoveries that could not happen otherwise. Without those peaceful breaks, there would be no chance to find things again with fresh eyes, like stumbling upon a hidden gem you thought was gone. the hundreds or thousands of years after a big downfall act like fertile ground after a fire, giving the planet time to recover and mend so the next wave of people can start planting their seeds in rich, renewed soil full of nutrients. This earthly quietness is not a mean punishment or a cruel twist of fate. It is a kind of loving restoration, helping everything bounce back stronger. Even after the biggest disasters that shake the world to its core, life finds a way to start over with determination. Colourful coral reefs rebuild themselves bit by bit on rocky skeletons. Tall trees push up through cracked ruins to reach for the sun, and the fresh air clears out the old pollution until it sparkles clean again. The planet lets go of the noisy chaos but tucks away the important lessons deep in its hidden layers, like a wise guardian saving treasures for the right moment. Maybe that explains why the hints from a possible very first society are so faint and hard to spot, like whispers carried on a gentle breeze that you have to strain to hear. Those clues might not have been smashed away in a fit of rage or destruction, but softly blended back into the flow of time, absorbed like rain soaking into thirsty ground. Their quietness could have been a choice they made on purpose, not something forced upon them by bad luck. If those ancient people saw their end coming from far away, perhaps through smart predictions or signs in the stars, they might have welcomed it with open arms, understanding that all things need a restful pause before springing back to life with vigour. They could have believed deep in their hearts that the core of their wisdom, the truly vital parts that shape how we think and live, would live on in the natural designs of the world around us, in the gut feelings that guide humanity, and in the steady beat of the planet's own heartbeat. This quiet gap between societies might even be something we need, like a built-in safety valve to keep things from getting out of hand. It stops raw knowledge from turning into harmful pride or overconfidence, because every climb to greatness brings a swell of ego, and every tumble down teaches a hard lesson in being humble. When the quietness arrives, it grounds the whole planet again and resets how we see what's important, reminding us that true builders fade away but their smart influences linger on, ready for the next bunch to uncover and admire as if it is all brand new. Today's thinkers and researchers sometimes chat about this idea called the Great Filter, which suggests that in the huge expanse of the universe, smart groups might wipe themselves out before they get too spread out or advanced. Right here in our own world, that great filter could just be this natural quietness, a built-in time of forgetting that is part of how intelligent life works and grows. It makes sure no one kind holds on to power for too long, keeping everything in a fair balance and teaching the toughest lesson of all, that lasting through time means working together with the planet, not trying to boss it around or conquer it like a prize. And perhaps that is why so many different ways of life around the world treat quietness as something holy and special, like a sacred space to be respected. The little breaks between notes in a melody are what give the music its shape and emotion. The calm moment before someone speaks builds up excitement, and quietness itself is not about something missing. It is bursting with promise and what could be. For that very first society, it might have worked the same way. Their downfall and disappearance were not a crushing defeat, but a beautiful change, a thoughtful way to hand over the light of knowledge without pushing it too hard or making it burn out. Whenever we gaze at the broken down remains of old worlds, like wandering through dusty temples or climbing overgrown hills that were once grand palaces, we often get a wave of sadness washing over us, as if we are grieving for lost genius and beauty that can never come back. But maybe the planet views it differently, seeing a smooth flow of connection instead of broken pieces. Each quiet pause is just a short break between parts of one endless flowing song that keeps playing on. The deep quietness from the first society turned into the foundation, where our own story got written, like a canvas ready for new paint. The designs they left behind, the massive stone monuments, and the captivating myths all still send out soft vibrations, mixing quietly with our modern tunes and adding depth without us even noticing at first. In these busy days of ours, we can already pick up on how delicate our own lively sounds really are. The constant whir of machines working non-stop, the bright glow from cities that light up the night like artificial stars, and the quick pulse of messages flying around the globe. It all seems so solid and forever, but it is really just another short chapter in the big book. If everything suddenly shut down tomorrow, like the power grids flickering out for good, That familiar quietness would rush back in faster than you might think, like an old friend returning home. In just a handful of days, the skies would clear up and sparkle with freshness, making the real stars pop out sharper and more numerous than we remember. Within a few months, tough grass would push through cracks in the hard pavement, turning grey streets green again. Jump ahead a couple of years and wild forests would reclaim the abandoned highways, wrapping them in branches and leaves until they vanish. The planet does not have to do anything special. It simply sits back and lets nature do its thing, because quietness is its natural way of being, calm and unchanging. But this idea does not have to scare us or make us gloomy. In truth, it brings a weird kind of comfort, like knowing that no matter what, things will keep going. The quietness that follows any big change is also a fresh start, a sign that the tale is shifting to new tellers and listeners. Our world does not smash things to bits on purpose. It gently resets the board, clearing space for new games to begin. And hidden inside every quiet period is the spark for old memories to come back in surprising shapes, ready to inspire once more. We could very well be the fresh burst of sound filling up the most recent quiet gap, with our gadgets, discoveries and creative works all acting as the planet's way of recalling its own history through our hands and minds. The drive that pushed ancient people to stack stones into soaring pyramids is the same one launching our satellites into the vast blackness of space today. The eager wonder that led them to sketch star maps on cave walls now helps us chart the cosmos with digital precision and endless data. We are all linked in this ongoing chat, just the latest voices piping up after a lengthy break, carrying the thread forward without a seam. The quietness from that first society might not have been a big empty hole, but a soft murmur that keeps going through the repeating patterns we spot and rediscover every day. When we line up our own buildings to match the stars' paths, or dive into old legends hunting for buried truths, or tune into the planet's slow, deep beats like ocean waves or seasonal shifts, we are responding to that murmur, keeping the back and forth alive across ages. One day we too will grow quiet, our shining cities dimming and fading into the background, our stored information scattering like leaves in the wind, and our proud monuments wearing down under rain and time. The quietness will wrap around everything once again, patient and inevitable. But if we have picked up any wisdom from the ones who went before us, it is that this hush does not signal a full stop. It means the world is gearing up to express itself anew through fresh perspectives and eager builders. Buried deep in the ground or lost under rolling seas, the signs of our era will sink into the planet's vast memory bank, a slim band of unusual chemicals, a sprinkle of leftover objects that refuse to break, and a scattering of tough structures that hold out against the elements a little longer. Far off in the future, another group might dig them up and puzzle over who we were, examining our faded sites, following our star alignments, and unravelling our woven tales. They will uncover designs that ring a bell in their souls, and in that moment, they will grasp what we are starting to see, that everyone is woven into one grand narrative, retold endlessly with only those quiet breaths in between to separate the parts. It is tempting to view quietness as the ultimate closer, like the curtain dropping on a show, but perhaps it is closer to a restful nap, the calm space between inhales and exhales, or the peaceful dark just before the sun peaks over the horizon. The deep quietness from the first society was profound, yet far from vacant. It became the nurturing soil where all later growth sprouted up strong. We stand as living evidence that the quietness did its job well, that lost memories can resurface, and that wisdom has a way of being reborn fresh and vibrant. And lurking somewhere, maybe even right now in the shadows, the upcoming quietness waits with endless patience, not as a danger lurking to strike, but as a gentle assurance that when our bustling sounds die down, the planet will pause, reflect on what was, hold on to the good bits, and kick off a new chapter with renewed spirit. In this way, the tale keeps unfolding softly, weaving through the gaps between spoken words and unspoken thoughts, through the extended calm that always trails after bursts of creation. Because ultimately, quietness is not what kicks in when the story grinds to a halt. It is the welcoming space that lets the following one bloom into existence. There is a soft, ongoing chat that threads through all of history, older than any spoken tongue and broader than any single group of people. It does not boom out loud like thunder, but it never fully fades away either, humming quietly in the background like a distant river. This is the back and forth between all humans and our shared home planet, between the things we construct with our hands and the stuff that lasts through storms, between what we remember clearly and what slips into forgetfulness, between noisy activity and peaceful stillness, every carefully placed rock in a wall, every legend retold around a warm fire, every sketch of a map on parchment or screen, and every curious question posed aloud is a piece of this endless exchange, adding to its richness without end. We like to picture history as a straight line marching forward, like marks on a calendar, but maybe it is more like a big room full of echoes, where one voice trails off just as another picks up the tune. Each era calls out into the vastness of time, unknowingly replying to the one before, creating a chain of whispers across the ages. The explorers and question askers of right now are simply the most recent ones joining in, following the lead of forgotten designers from lost worlds, the tale spinners who shaped memories into enchanting stories, the tough survivors who clutched onto scraps of truth amid chaos, and maybe even that very first society, sending their messages through shapes and rocks that span the centuries. Every time period believes it is starting the talk from scratch, but really it is jumping into a discussion that kicked off way before anyone started keeping records. This chat begins with pure wonder, that basic wide-eyed query like a kid might ask, "What is this thing, and why is it here?" It is the same spark that made the earliest humans tilt their heads back to stare at the sparkling night sky in awe. The same drive that pushed old-time creators to chisel meaning into hard stone, and the same urge that nudges today's experts to gaze deep into the stars with powerful tools. This sense of curiosity is how the planet tunes into its own voice through us, using our minds to explore and recall. When we poke at the world with questions, we're not outsiders looking in. We're woven right into its fabric, helping it remember and understand itself better with each new insight. Each society brings its own special words and ways to this big talk, like adding colourful threads to a giant tapestry. The earliest inventors might have chatted through massive builds, their rules etched in enduring rock. The wise thinkers from places like ancient Greece shaped those rules into clear logic and debates. The learned folks from times long past turned them into written books and scrolls. Today's knowledge seekers express it all through numbers, tests and clever setups. And now, our fancy gadgets speak in streams of information, stretching the discussion out past our blue planet into the silent depths of outer space. The tools we use keep evolving, but the heart of it stays steady. We are all still chasing the same understanding that those first ones might have grasped: how to live with purpose in a cosmos that is always shifting and changing. But a real chat means listening just as much as talking, and that is a part humans sometimes overlook in their rush. The old ones paid close attention to the flow of changing seasons, the repeating dances of stars across the sky, and the natural loops of growth followed by rest. They learned from the hills and valleys, bent to the planet's whims, and created things that fit snugly with its rules. Their exchange with the world was a two-way street full of give and take. At some point, though, that even balance tipped, and our current way of life shouts louder than ever while tuning out the replies. Still, the talk rolls on without stopping. The planet responds in its own tongue, through shifting weather patterns, rising and falling tides, and the mix of elements in the air. It nudges us softly at first, then more strongly with things like overflowing rivers, roaring flames, or dry spells that parch the land. All ways of giving feedback in a conversation that has been going for thousands upon thousands of years. That first society might have gotten it better than we do now, seeing quietness and careful listening as key to sticking around. Maybe that is why their creations line up so perfectly with the planet's natural cycles, tuned like a fine instrument to its shapes and movements. They were not out to tame or rule the world. They aimed to stay in tune with it, chatting as equals. When today's experts study those perfect lineups, like how old buildings catch the sun exactly on special days or mirror the moon's path, they are not just measuring old bricks and stones. They are decoding a form of talking, where each alignment is like a sentence crafted from watchful eyes. It declares, "We noticed this repeating design, and we wove ourselves into it." That is what makes these old spots feel eternal. They are not just lists of facts from the past. They show us how to really listen and connect. Sometimes, If you stand in one of those ancient places at the break of day during a turning point in the year, or under a dark sky free from city glow, you can almost sense the chat picking back up, like the air itself hums with old familiarity, as if the rocks recall being truly seen and appreciated. You come to understand that what seems dusty and old is not the place itself, but the fresh act of paying attention. The instant when a curious mind links up with the world's hidden rhythms is always brand new, no matter how ancient the rhythm might be. That is why this back and forth never wraps up. It gets reborn every time someone pauses to notice deeply enough to catch its whisper. The talk does not just weave through the big sweep of history, it flows right through each person's life, touching everyone who ever feels a spark of awe. Every individual who gazes at the twinkling lights above and wonders, every tester of ideas in a lab, every creator capturing beauty in paint or words, every young one bubbling with why questions, they're all adding to it in their own styles. Even without knowing, we are echoing the same push that made those first creators sync their works with the heavens. We are still whispering, I get it. I hold on to this. I crave to know more. If that first society really was out there, they might have figured out that the best way to make their words last forever was to blend them right into the world's bones, not in breakable books or fragile items, but in the bonds between people and the planet, between ideas and natural shapes. That is how their part of the chat lives on, locked into our basic urges, into perfect measurements, into timeless tales. We might have lost their exact phrases, but we still use their basic structure, feeling the tug to create, wander, calculate, and tie the solid ground under us to the distant lights overhead. Even our newest inventions, no matter how cutting-edge they seem, echo their old ways. We etch signs and sky charts onto space travelers we send out, we build star-watching spots aligned with far-off bodies, and we shape our info webs after nature's own networks. Each step builds on the old rhythm, growing through harmony rather than force. It is simple to think of this exchange as us doing all the talking, but the planet joins in too, with quiet, steady inputs that are easy to miss if you are not watching. Our world replies to our pokes through clues it offers up. Ancient bones in rock, stacked layers of earth telling stories of change, shifting winds and rains, and the bustling dance of living things. Every breakthrough, every aha moment is its way of responding. When a digger unearths an old handmade tool from under piles of dirt, it is like the planet handing over a keepsake, murmuring, "You have been here all along, you belong." When a far-seeing device catches glow from a star born eons ago, the whole cosmos chimes in, "Yes, you are woven into my fabric." So this chat stretches beyond just us and our home. It is between smart minds and the stuff of being, between being awake and all that keeps it going. The first society might have seen this crystal clear, with a view where knowing and respecting went hand in hand. To grasp the vast out there was not about cutting it apart, but dancing along with its flow. They chatted with everything through numbers and evenness, betting that those basics would bridge across endless time, the nearest to a shared tongue across stars. Maybe that is the true note hidden in their builds, that the cosmos is for chatting with, not just poking at, and that deep listening is a way of jumping in fully. When those creators synced their holy spots to the skies, they were not just watching, they were saying hello, keeping alive a talk that sparked when the first glint of thought lit up on this spinning rock. The quietness that came after their time was not a cut-off, just a breather. Every hush since has been another short rest, letting the world catch its breath, letting memories build up power before bubbling out again. The seekers of now, the dreamers of what is next, the makers of whatever follows, they are all links in the chain of response. In this light, time does not snap the thread, it stretches it longer. Each stretch of years speaks with what tools it has. The first ones used rock and night lights. We use info bits and whirring devices. The upcoming ones might dream up ways we cannot picture yet, but the beat stays true. Ask, answer, marvel, grasp, and that rhythm glues societies together over the wide, quiet gaps. There is a humble feeling in spotting that the planet itself might speak this tongue fluently, like an expert. The deeper we peek into living webs, the clearer it gets that evenness and backtalk rule it all. Woods whisper through underground roots, Streams adjust to downpours in smart fixes. Even the sky blanket tweaks to stay steady. Life and stuff, in their quiet styles, are always chatting away. We're just one splash of that bigger exchange, the bit of the world that can voice questions out loud about what it already senses in the hush. That is why digging into old times is never only about what was. It is spotting we're in the same yarn, chasing the same puzzles. The pyramid stackers and the cosmos charters are chatting over huge time spans in matching tones. The tone of wonder, of awake minds stretching to touch themselves through the ages. And perhaps, way out in the endless black, the same dance plays on another speck, another smart spark, another world holding its own take on this forever chat. If groups rise and dip everywhere like here, the cosmos must brim with these soft swaps, worlds wondering who they are, recalling through bounces of their makes. When we beam our signs into the deep, we blend into that group song. We are not yelling into nothing, we are slipping into a talk that has always hummed. The words can be plain. We exist. We tune in. That might be what the first ones said too, through their builds, their designs, the sharp care that still pulses soft under our steps. This forever chat does not need fancy speech. It flows through being aware, through linking up, through caring enough to puzzle over. It shifts through tales and facts, through hush and bustle, through breaks and fresh starts. It is what makes smart thinking feel old even when fresh, what ties every stretch into one whole. When the first society went quiet, they did not shut down the talk, they handed it ahead. When we hush, we will too. The chat will roll on through whatever shape the next awake takes, human or beyond. Because the world keeps chatting and the cosmos keeps replying. Maybe that is true lasting, the hold of the puzzle itself, not any one bunch or way. The puzzle echoing since first gazes hit stars. What do we belong to? Every group asks for it. Every hush sharpens it. Every fresh find answers. And when the next bunch rises and eyes our faded spots, they will sense what we do now, that soft known tug, the feel of hearing this tone before even sounds recall. They will toss in their bits, their finds, their hushes. And so, the chat stays forever, never closing, never looping exact, just growing deeper. Somewhere in the cosmos's long recall, the opening ask and closing reply might sit together, waiting for us to see they match. And the planet will keep tuning in as ever, spinning slowly under lights, bearing every tone, every hush, every bounce into the next light of knowing. As we wrap up this dive into the chance of groups before us, we end not with solid yes or no, but with something richer. Puzzles that push us to view our spot differently. Whether that first society was real in the ways we dream or not, the hunt itself shines bright. It nudges that the past is never done unfolding, that our world hides more riddles than we have cracked, and that the line between tall tales and true happenings is thinner and more bendy than we thought. The designs we've poked at, the builds synced to skies, the flood yarns matching earth shifts, the clever makes before known groups, the hidden marks in deep dirt, all hint at a fact we are just starting to hug. That human skill reaches way back into misty before times, farther than usual timelines let on. Now, we are not the starters in wandering about before us, folks, and we will not be the closers. Coming ages will stare at our leftover bits with the same mix of wow and head scratch that we get from pyramids or big stone rings. They will poke the same puzzles we do now, and maybe that is the biggest takeaway from this path. We all join something bigger than oneself, a worldwide chat across eras, a shared recall that sticks through rock and yarn, through hush and fresh spots. The first society, if real, still chats with us, not in readable script or holdable bits, but through left designs, sparked puzzles, the nod that we loop in a wheel way older than any lone bunch. Their hand down is not proof they were. It is in pushing us to either world closer, tuned to what time and dirt say, and grasp that once grabbed know-how never fully vanishes. It just waits, steady as rock, for the next ready bunch to catch its call. So maybe the true puzzle is not if a first society was, but what we will leave for after us. What designs will they spot? What notes will they crack? And will they see, as we start to, that they are not finding fresh but recalling very, very old? The chat rolls on, the hush waits, and between, recall holds strong,